The rain came down in sheets that night, turning the packed earth of the gathering grounds into a slick mirror that reflected nothing but darkness. Lyra Ashenheart stood at the edge of the bonfire circle, arms wrapped tight around herself, watching flames dance and spit sparks into the stormy sky. At 21 years old, she had attended 5 of these ceremonies. 5 years of standing invisible while others were chosen. 5 years of understanding that some rejections were silent and absolute. The smoke carried scents of pine and sage, mingling with the wet wool smell of bodies pressed close together. Everyone seeking warmth, everyone seeking belonging, everyone except her. She had learned long ago to make herself small at these gatherings. Her hair, pale as winter wheat, hung limp and damp against her shoulders, a beacon that marked her as different, even before anyone caught her scent. Or rather, her lack of one. The other Omegas carried that sweet, heady fragrance that made alphas straighten and take notice. Lyra carried nothing but the faint smell of lavender soap and desperation. 3 months ago, she had knelt in the dirt floor of her cabin, hands wrist-deep in another person's blood. The hunter's name was Marcus Redthorn, a good man with 3 children and a mate who loved him. He had been gored by a territorial boar while checking his trap lines in the disputed border zone. The wound had torn through his abdomen, spilling intestines onto the forest floor. His packmates had carried him to Lyra's door because the main healer, Elder Thorn, had been attending a difficult birth on the other side of Packlands. Marcus had been unconscious when they arrived. His skin was the color of old ash, pulse thready and rapid, breathing shallow, classic signs of hemorrhagic shock. Lyra had looked at the wound, at the pulsing arterial bleed, at his dilated pupils. She had made her assessment in less than 3 seconds. Without surgery, he would be dead in 10 minutes. With surgery, he might survive. She had sent his friends away. They had protested, demanded to stay, to help. But Lyra knew that well-meaning hands often did more harm than good in situations like this. She needed space, silence, the ability to think clearly without emotional interference. She had boiled water, laid out her grandmother's antique surgical instruments with hands that did not shake. The scalpels were older than she was, forged from carbon steel that held an edge like nothing modern medicine could match. Her grandmother had carried them through 40 years of war, through makeshift field hospitals where the screaming never stopped, through forest clearings where the only light came from oil lamps, through desperate midnight operations where the line between life and death was measured in seconds. Each instrument had a history. The largest scalpel had removed shrapnel from an Alpha commander's chest during the Battle of Thornwood Pass. The curved needle had closed more abdominal wounds than Lyra could count. The retractors had held open flesh while her grandmother extracted bullets, stitched arteries, and performed miracles with nothing but skill and will. Now they were Lyra's, passed down on her grandmother's deathbed, pressed into her hands with a whispered command. Use them well. Save who you can. Do not let them tell you that you cannot. The surgery had taken 2 hours. Marcus's abdomen had been a mess. The boar's tusk had perforated his intestine in 3 places, torn through the mesentery, nicked the inferior mesenteric artery. Every second counted. Lyra had worked with the methodical precision her grandmother had drilled into her since childhood. Clamp the bleeder first. Control hemorrhage or nothing else matters. She had isolated the artery, applied pressure, tied it off with silk suture. The bleeding slowed, stopped. Next, assess the damage. She had run the bowel, checking every inch for perforation. Found the 3 holes, debrided the edges, closed each one with careful interrupted sutures. Her grandmother's voice in her head the entire time. Slow is smooth is fast. Every stitch counts when you are all that stands between a warrior and the dark. The mesenteric tear had required delicate work. The tissue was friable, prone to tearing further if handled roughly. Lyra had used the finest silk she had, tiny stitches placed with infinite care, approximating tissue without strangulation, ensuring blood flow to the bowel. One wrong move and Marcus would develop necrosis, dead bowel, sepsis, death. She had checked her work 3 times, looked for bleeding she might have missed, found none, then closed him in layers: fascia, muscle, subcutaneous tissue, skin, each layer precise, each suture placed exactly where it needed to be. When she finally stepped back, her hands were cramping. Her back ached from bending over. Her eyes burned from the strain of working by candlelight. But Marcus was breathing easier. His color was better. His pulse was stronger. He had woken 2 days later, confused, in pain, but alive. His mate had wept with gratitude, had tried to give Lyra everything they owned. Lyra had refused payment, had accepted only the wildflowers Marcus's children brought her, purple asters that they had picked themselves, that now sat dried and pressed between the pages of her grandmother's journal. And the Pack Council had summoned her 3 days after that to reprimand her for overstepping her authority. Omegas assist healers. They do not perform surgery. Know your place, girl. This cannot happen again. The words had come from Chief Enforcer Garrett Wolfsbane, 30 years old, hard-eyed, a man who had lost his younger brother in a border skirmish 2 years ago. The boy had bled out from a femoral artery wound because no skilled medic had been available. Garrett had been carrying that grief ever since, turning it into rigid adherence to rules, to structure, to the belief that if everyone just followed the proper procedures, no one else would have to die. Lyra understood his pain. She even sympathized with it, but she could not accept his conclusion. Sometimes following the rules meant watching people die who did not have to. Elder Thorne had stood silent during the proceedings. He was 73 years old, and his hands shook with palsy. He could no longer hold a scalpel steady enough for delicate work, could no longer perform the intricate procedures that field medicine sometimes demanded. Everyone knew it. No one said it. And so the pack pretended that age and infirmity did not matter, that hierarchy and proper order were more important than competence. Lyra had bowed her head and accepted the reprimand because the alternative was exile, because leaving pack protection meant death for an Omega, because she had nowhere else to go and no one who would take her in, because survival sometimes meant swallowing your pride and accepting injustice as the price of continued existence. But she had not forgotten, and she had not forgiven. And she had continued to practice her skills in secret, with small animals and careful study, preparing for the day when someone else's life would hang in the balance and rules would matter less than competence. Now she stood in the rain watching the choosing ceremony, remembering that moment, remembering the weight of another person's life in her hands, the feeling of competence, of purpose, of being exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. And remembering, too, the bitter aftermath, the reminder that her skills were tolerated only when convenient, valued only when no one else was available, accepted only as long as she stayed in her assigned place. Saving Marcus had proven she could handle complex trauma under pressure. She had worked alone, without supervision, without the safety net of more experienced healers standing by to correct her mistakes. And she had succeeded. Had brought a dying man back from the edge through nothing but knowledge and nerve and the training her grandmother had drilled into her bones. That should have meant something, should have earned recognition. Instead, it had earned reprimands and warnings and the council's thinly veiled threat that next time there would be consequences. Her grandmother would have been furious. Lyra's grandmother, Lyra Ashenheart, had been a force of nature, small in stature but enormous in presence. She had trained as a healer during peacetime, learning from the old texts and older practitioners who still remembered medicine before modern convenience. Then war had come, the territorial wars that had reshaped pack boundaries and left scars on an entire generation. Lyra had gone to the front lines, not because she was ordered, not because it was expected of an Omega, but because wounded warriors needed care and she had the skills to provide it. She had spent 4 decades in field hospitals, had trained a generation of combat medics, had saved hundreds of lives through sheer force of knowledge and will, and she had taught Lyra everything. The lessons had started when Lyra was 6 years old. Too young, some said, but Lyra had been adamant. Healing is not instinct. It is learned skill. It is practice. It is knowledge accumulated through repetition and study. Start early or do not start at all. Lyra had learned to identify herbs before she learned to read, had memorized the locations of major arteries before she understood arithmetic, had practiced tying surgical knots before her hands were big enough to grip the needle properly. Her grandmother had been patient but exacting. Mistakes in healing cost lives. There was no room for carelessness, no acceptance of almost good enough. By the time Lyra was 12, she could perform basic wound care unsupervised. By 15, she could manage complex trauma. By 16, when her scent should have bloomed but did not, she had already assisted in more than 50 surgical procedures, had seen things that most Omegas never saw, had developed skills that most Omegas never needed. Her grandmother had known even then what was coming, had known that Lyra's difference would mark her, would limit her, would force her to survive on competence alone because she would never have the biological advantages other Omegas took for granted. In Mira's final days, when the sickness had stolen most of her words and left only fragments, she had gripped Lyra's hand with surprising strength. "They will tell you that healing is Omega's instinct," she had whispered, her voice paper thin but fierce. "Do not believe them. Healing is tactical, strategic, essential. When you heal a warrior, you earn their respect. When you save a life, you prove your worth in ways that scent and bloodlines never can." Her grip had tightened. "Do not let them make you small, girl. Do not let their blindness convince you that you are invisible. You are meant for more than surviving in the margins. You are meant to save lives, to heal wounds, to stand between the living and the dead, and tip the balance toward life." She had pressed the surgical kit into Lyra's hands. "Use them well. Save who you can. Do not let them tell you that you cannot." Those had been her last coherent words. 3 days later, she was gone, and Lyra had been alone with nothing but skill and tools and the weight of expectations she was not sure she could meet. The ceremony continued around her. Pack leader Magnus Stonehaven rose from his seat on the raised platform, his silver-streaked hair catching the firelight. 55 years old, veteran of the territorial wars, a man who had earned his authority through blood and steel and the kind of tactical thinking that kept packs alive during lean times. His presence commanded attention even in this weather. "Tonight we honor the bonds that strengthen our pack," he began. His voice carried across the crowd without effort. "Tonight we present our unmated Omegas to those who have served, to those who have bled for our protection, to those who have earned the right to choose first." It was pack law. Warriors who had seen combat got first selection at choosing ceremonies. It was supposed to be an honor, a reward for service. In practice, it meant Omegas were presented like prize livestock, ranked by the strength of their scent, the promise of their bloodlines, the political advantages their families could offer. Lyra had attended her first choosing 5 years ago. She had been 16 and trembling. Her mother had dressed her in white. Her father had stood proud. The entire pack had waited for her scent to bloom as she was presented to the bonfire circle. Nothing had happened. She had stood there for 10 humiliating minutes while the silence grew thick and suffocating. Her mother had wept. Her father had looked away. And Lyra had understood, in that crystallizing moment of rejection, that some failures are silent and absolute. Her grandmother had found her afterward, sobbing in the darkness beyond the firelight. The old woman had been dying even then, though Lyra had not known it. The sickness that would take her was already eating away at her mind, stealing words and memories and leaving only fragments. "The quietest waters run deepest, little one." Her grandmother's papery fingers had touched Lyra's cheek. "When the world tells you that you are empty, remember this. Your worth is not in what they can smell. It is in what you can do, what you know, what you can save." Lyra had not understood then. She was not sure she understood now, but she held those words close like a talisman against the cold. The ceremony continued. Young Omegas were presented. Alphas stepped forward to claim them. Bonds were announced. The pack grew stronger through sacred unions. Lyra watched from the shadows and tried not to feel the ache of exclusion. Movement at the edge of the gathering caught her attention. Heads turned. Whispers rippled outward like stones thrown in still water. Through the crowd came figures Lyra had never seen before. 4 of them, moving with the kind of disciplined coordination that spoke of military training. The first to emerge into the firelight was a woman, bronze skin marked with the kind of scars you only got from serious combat. Her eyes swept the crowd with professional assessment, cataloging threats and exits. Her hand rested near the long knife at her hip, not touching it, not threatening, just ready. Behind her came a lean man whose movements were almost predatory. A scout, Lyra thought, someone who spent more time in the wilderness than in civilization. His eyes never stopped moving, tracking patterns in the crowd, noting positions. Then came the alpha. Lyra felt the air change as he stepped into the light. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, moving with the kind of controlled power that made people instinctively step aside. His dark hair was shot through with silver at the temples, despite what she estimated to be only 38 or perhaps 40 years. A scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, the kind of injury that should have killed but somehow had not. He wore traveling clothes, mud-splattered and worn from hard use, but there was no mistaking what he was. Alpha. The word itself seemed inadequate. This was a man who had commanded, who had led warriors into battle and brought them home, who carried authority like a second skin. His eyes swept the crowd and paused. For the briefest moment they met Lyra's, storm-gray, tired, carrying the weight of old grief. Then they moved on. Behind him, clutching his hand with fierce intensity, was a child. Lyra's breath caught. The little girl could not have been more than 6 years old. She had tangled dark curls and enormous eyes that reflected the firelight like a wild animal's. Her clothes were too large, rolled at the cuffs. Her feet were bare despite the cold and the mud. She pressed herself against the Alpha's leg, her other thumb jammed in her mouth, and watched the crowd with the kind of wariness that spoke of hard experience. Magnus rose slowly. His expression shifted from ceremonial warmth to something harder, more calculating, something that looked almost like old pain resurfacing. "Commander Ironwood." The words carried across the sudden silence like a stone dropping into still water. "I did not expect to see you again, not after Blackridge." The name hung in the air. Blackridge. Lyra knew that name. Every wolf who had lived through the territorial wars knew that name, the Battle of Blackridge Pass, 20 years ago, one of the bloodiest engagements of the entire conflict, hundreds dead, both sides claiming victory, both sides carrying scars that would never fully heal. The Alpha's jaw tightened fractionally. "That was a long time ago, Magnus. Not long enough." Magnus's voice carried old grief, old anger. Then his expression shifted, became something closer to resignation. "But that is the past, and you seek sanctuary for the present. Alpha Stonehaven." The Alpha's voice was a low rumble that seemed to resonate in Lyra's chest. "Forgive the interruption. We seek sanctuary. 3 days, no more. We are traveling through and need only shelter from the storm." The two men regarded each other across the fire. Lyra could see it now. The weight of shared history, the kind that came from having fought on the same battlefield, from having seen the same horrors, from carrying wounds that had nothing to do with steel and everything to do with memory. Magnus had been young during the territorial wars, a junior officer leading border patrols. He had earned his rank through competence and courage, had been decorated for valor 3 times, had lost half his unit in a single engagement, and carried the survivor's guilt ever since. Commander Ironwood had been something else entirely. Lyra knew the name now. Cale Ironwood, Alpha Commander of the 5th Tactical Unit, elite forces, the kind of wolves who went places other units could not, who completed missions other commanders would not even attempt, who operated behind enemy lines with nothing but skill and nerve and the absolute trust that came from shared blood. His unit had been legendary. 15 wolves who moved like a single predator, who could infiltrate, sabotage, extract, and vanish before anyone knew they had been there. They had turned the tide of 3 major battles, had saved countless lives through their interventions, had been heroes in every sense that mattered. Until Blackridge. Lyra did not know the details. They were classified, buried under layers of military secrecy and command structure politics. But she knew the outcome. The 5th Tactical Unit had been sent to Blackridge on an extraction mission. They had gone in 15 strong. 7 had come out. The rest had died in ways that were still whispered about around fires. Ambush, betrayal, incompetence in high command that had sent good wolves to die for political considerations. Commander Ironwood had been honorably discharged after Blackridge, not for failure, not for incompetence, but because he had refused to follow orders he considered suicidal, because he had prioritized his unit's survival over mission completion, because he had chosen his wolves over his career. Some called him a coward, others called him a hero, most just called him gone. And now he was here, standing in the rain with a child's hand in his and a request for 3 days of shelter, looking at Magnus with eyes that carried too much history, too much pain, too much of the weight that came from command decisions that haunted you long after the battle ended. "This is a sacred ceremony," Magnus said. His voice was carefully neutral. "You arrive at an inopportune time." Nevertheless, the Alpha's gaze never wavered. We have coin and information about the rogue movements in the Northern Territories. Information your pack might find valuable." A long silence followed. The bronze woman's hand moved fractionally closer to her weapon. Lyra could see now that she carried herself like someone who had seen serious combat. Multiple scars on her arms, the kind of stance that spoke of years under fire, a warrior who had earned her place through blood. The scout's eyes found every exit, cataloged every potential threat. His body language screamed military intelligence. Someone who had spent years in hostile territory, who had learned to see danger before it materialized, who survived by being 3 steps ahead of everyone else. And the child. The child pressed closer to the alpha, her small face buried against his leg. But her eyes tracked everything, watching, assessing, looking for threats with the kind of hypervigilance that only came from trauma, from having learned the hard way that danger could come from anywhere, that safety was never guaranteed. They were a unit. Lyra could see it clearly now. Not just traveling companions, a tactical team, former military, operating outside normal pack structure, bound together by something stronger than hierarchy, bound by trust, by shared experience, by the kind of loyalty that came from having bled together. "Very well." Magnus's voice cut through the tension. 3 days. You will be assigned quarters in the Eastern Lodge, but you will respect our ceremonies and keep to yourselves. We have no desire to relive old conflicts. Understood. The Alpha inclined his head. Acceptance without submission. We appreciate your hospitality. As he moved to follow the escort Magnus had gestured forward, the child stumbled. The ground was slick with rain and mud. Her bare feet could find no purchase. She went down hard on her knees, but she did not cry out. Children who have learned that crying brings nothing good rarely do. Her sharp intake of breath was the only sound. Lyra moved without thinking. Wait. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, too loud in the renewed silence. Every eye turned to her. Heat flooded her face, but she forced herself forward, pulling the thick shawl from her shoulders. "The ground is freezing," she said quietly. "She needs this." She knelt in the mud, not caring about her only good dress, not caring about the stairs, not caring about anything except this small, shivering child who reminded her so much of herself, of being alone, of being unwanted, of being cold in more ways than one. The shawl was wool, heavy and warm. Lyra wrapped it carefully around the girl's feet, tucking the ends to keep them secure. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in the child's face, the hollow look of someone who had been running too long, who had seen too much. "There," Lyra made her voice soft, gentle, the way she did with injured animals. "Better?" The child stared at her with those enormous eyes. Her thumb was still in her mouth. She was trembling, but slowly, cautiously, she nodded. Then her free hand reached out, small fingers tangled in Lyra's pale hair, feeling the texture with something like wonder. "Pretty," the child murmured around her thumb, "like moonlight." Lyra's throat tightened. She managed a smile. "Thank you, sweetheart." When she looked up, the Alpha was watching her. His expression was unreadable, something between surprise and a deeper, more complicated emotion. In the firelight, she could see his face clearly now. Strong features marked by old scars, eyes the color of storm clouds, a mouth set in a hard line that suggested smiling was a skill half forgotten. "Generous." His voice was quiet, not quite a question. Lyra stood, acutely aware of how she must look. Mud-stained, shawlless, her lack of scent painfully obvious now that she stood so close to someone whose presence filled the air with pine and steel and something wild she had no name for. "She is cold," Lyra said simply. The child's fingers tightened in the Alpha's hand. She looked between them with something calculating moving behind her exhaustion, something weighing, measuring. "You are nice," the child announced with the blunt honesty only children possess. "Do you live here?" "I do." "Are you someone's mate?" The question landed like a physical blow. Lyra heard someone laugh, quickly muffled, felt the weight of knowing stares, the familiar shame rising hot in her chest. "No, little one." Her voice stayed steady through sheer force of will. "I am not." "Oh." The child considered this, head tilted. "Do you want to be?" The Alpha's hand tightened on the child's shoulder. "Ember." The warning was clear in his voice, but gentle, always gentle with her. The child ignored him, her focus entirely on Lyra. "Because I need someone safe, someone kind, someone who smells like flowers and does not look at me like I am broken. The silence that followed felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Lyra was painfully aware of every person watching this moment, calculating its meaning, adding it to the ledger of her strangeness. But she was also aware of this small girl's fierce hope, the way she had identified a kindred spirit in the space of moments and decided, with the simple certainty children possess, that they belonged together. The Alpha spoke again, softer this time. "Forgive her. She has had a difficult journey." "There is nothing to forgive." Lyra could not look away from those storm-gray eyes. "She is right. About everything." His jaw tightened. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that exists between people who have learned to carry wounds quietly, who have survived by making themselves small, who know what it means to be valued for what they can do, but never for who they are. Then Magnus's voice cut through. "Enough. This ceremony has been disrupted enough for one night. Escort our guests to their quarters." As the Alpha moved to follow, the child twisted in his grip, looking back at Lyra. "What is your name?" "Lyra." The word came out softer than she intended. "Lyra Ashenheart." "Lyra." The child repeated it, tasting the syllables, like the instrument, like music. Despite everything, Lyra found herself smiling. "What is yours?" "Ember." The child's expression was solemn, like the fire. "Papa Kael says I am named for things that keep burning even when everything else goes cold." The strangers disappeared into the darkness, guided by reluctant pack members toward the Eastern Lodge. The ceremony resumed, Magnus's voice rising again in ritual words Lyra had heard too many times. But she was not listening anymore. She stood at the edge of the bonfire circle, shivering without her shawl, mud drying on her knees. Around her, the ceremony continued. Bonds were formed, futures decided. The pack strengthened through alliances and bloodlines and the careful preservation of hierarchy. And in the moments between Magnus's pronouncements, Lyra caught fragments of whispered conversation. "Did you see that? The Omega without a scent, throwing herself at strangers. Desperate. 5 years and still no match. She would take anyone at this point. The child is damaged. You can see it. And the Alpha, Commander Ironwood. I heard he lost his entire unit at Black Ridge, got them killed through incompetence. Not incompetence, cowardice. He abandoned the mission, left good wolves to die." The words stung. But Lyra had learned long ago to let pack gossip slide off like water. What they thought did not matter, had never mattered. She survived by being useful, by being competent, by making herself too valuable to exile despite her difference. The ceremony dragged on. More Omegas presented, more bonds announced. Finally, as the rain began to ease and the clouds parted to reveal cold stars, Magnus declared the ceremony complete. The pack dispersed, families heading to their homes, warriors gathering in small groups to drink and tell lies about their valor, Omegas clustering together, comparing matches and prospects and whispered secrets. Lyra walked home alone through the rain-soaked streets. Her cabin sat at the very edge of pack territory, where the forest pressed close and the sounds of communal life grew distant. It had been her grandmother's once, back when healers were respected, even if they were strange. After the old woman died, no one had wanted it. Too isolated, too full of drying herbs and mysterious jars, too touched by the kind of knowledge that made people uncomfortable. So they had given it to Lyra, charity dressed as practicality. Inside, she lit candles and built up the fire, changed out of her ruined dress. The mud would never come out completely. Another thing lost. But she had so little that losing anything felt significant. She sat in her grandmother's rocking chair and tried to quiet her mind, but her thoughts kept circling back to the child, to Ember, to the way she had looked at Lyra like she mattered, like she was someone worth knowing. And the Alpha, Kael Ironwood, 38 years old if the stories were accurate, commander of the legendary 5th Tactical Unit, a man who had chosen his wolves over his career, who carried grief in his eyes like a physical weight, who moved through the world with the controlled power of someone who had survived things that broke lesser wolves. He had looked at her, really looked, not past her, not through her, at her. And in that brief moment of connection, Lyra had felt something she had not felt in years. Seen, not for her lack of scent, not for her strangeness, but for her action, for her kindness, for the simple human gesture of wrapping a shivering child's feet. She walked to the window and stared out at the darkness beyond. Somewhere in the Eastern Lodge, Ember slept wrapped in a shawl that smelled of lavender and loneliness. Somewhere, Cale Ironwood stood watch over a child he had chosen to protect. Somewhere, possibilities stirred that Lyra had long since stopped allowing herself to imagine. Her grandmother's words echoed, "You are meant for more than surviving in the margins." But more required courage, required believing that somewhere in the world she might be valued for what she could offer instead of punished for what she lacked. Required hope, and hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment. The night wore on. Lyra tried to sleep but found no rest. Her mind would not quiet, would not stop replaying the day in fragments. Kael's storm-gray eyes watching her work, Ember's small hands in her hair, the weight of recognition between wounded souls. She rose and walked to her grandmother's desk, opened the leather journal where she kept her medical notes. Detailed records of every procedure, every case, every lesson learned, hundreds of pages accumulated over years of practice, evidence of competence no one wanted to acknowledge. She turned to a fresh page, wrote the date, then paused, pen hovering over paper. What was she documenting? A child asking if she wanted to be a mate? An alpha looking at her like she mattered? The dangerous whisper of possibility creeping into her carefully guarded heart? She set the pen down, closed the journal, returned to the rocking chair, and sat watching firelight dance across the ceiling beams. Tomorrow the strangers would still be here. 3 days Magnus had granted them. 3 days of sanctuary. 3 days during which anything might happen, or nothing might happen. Life might continue exactly as it had for 5 years, lonely, limited, resigned. But tonight, lying awake in the darkness, unable to sleep despite exhaustion, Lyra allowed herself to wonder, to imagine, to entertain the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than resignation. The thought kept her awake long into the night, her mind racing, her heart hammering with equal parts fear and anticipation. Outside, the storm had passed. Stars wheeled overhead in a sky scrubbed clean by rain. And somewhere in the Eastern Lodge, a child slept with dreams of safety, and a man kept watch with eyes that had seen too much loss. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own choices. But tonight, Lyra lay awake wrestling with possibility. With the dangerous seed of hope she could not quite make die despite every lesson she had learned about keeping expectations low. She did not sleep. Could not sleep. Her thoughts circled endlessly, examining this strange night from every angle. Looking for meaning, looking for hope, looking for any sign that tomorrow might be different from every other day of the past 5 years. The hours crept by. The fire burned down to coals, the candles guttered and died, and still Lyra lay awake, staring into darkness, wondering what dawn would bring. She lay awake, waiting, wondering, unable to quiet the racing thoughts that whispered of change and choice and the terrifying possibility that she might deserve more than what this pack had given her. She lay awake with possibility burning in her chest like a fever she could not shake. And despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, despite every rational reason to protect herself from disappointment, she could not make herself stop hoping. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to heartbreak. But lying in the darkness, unable to sleep, Lyra discovered that some things were worth the risk. The morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Lyra rose with first light, tired but unable to rest any longer. She dressed in her work clothes, simple tunic and pants, braided her hair back tight. If the day brought anything, she would face it as she always did. Competent, professional, ready. The pack was already stirring when she stepped outside. Warriors heading to training grounds, families beginning their daily routines, the rhythm of pack life continuing as it always did, indifferent to individual hopes or fears. Lyra made her way toward the central square. She needed supplies, herbs from the communal stores, bandages, thread, the small necessities of her work. Elder Thorne controlled the medical supplies, but he rarely denied her requests. Her skill was too useful, even if her existence was uncomfortable. She was crossing the square when she heard the commotion, voices raised in concern. A crowd gathering near the training grounds. Lyra's instincts kicked in before conscious thought. Where there were crowds and raised voices, there were often injuries. And where there were injuries, she was needed. She pushed through the gathered pack members, found a circle of warriors surrounding someone on the ground, a fighter, female, bronze-skinned, familiar. The woman from last night, the one who had arrived with Commander Ironwood. She was on her knees, face white with pain. Her left arm hung at an unnatural angle, shoulder dislocation. Lyra recognized it instantly, the way the joint sat too far forward, the hollow depression where the humeral head should be, the fighter's controlled breathing despite obvious agony. Lyra did not wait for permission. She knelt beside the injured woman. "Let me see." The bronze-skinned warrior's eyes snapped to her, storm gray, like Kael's, but harder, more suspicious. "Who are you?" "Lyra Ashenheart. I am a medic. Let me see your shoulder." The warrior hesitated, then pain won over caution. She nodded. Lyra assessed quickly. Anterior dislocation. The humeral head had popped forward out of the glenoid fossa. Common injury in hand-to-hand combat. Painful but manageable if reduced quickly. Leave it too long and you risked nerve damage, vascular compromise, permanent disability. How did this happen? Lyra kept her voice calm while her hands moved over the joint. Gentle, assessing. Training. The warrior's voice was tight. Your pack's combat instructor wanted to test my skills. I let my guard down. He got inside my defense. Lyra could see the instructor now, standing at the edge of the crowd with crossed arms and a satisfied expression. Roland Blackwood, 40 years old, more concerned with dominance displays than actual training. He had probably gone harder than necessary, proving a point about outsiders. I can reduce this, Lyra said, but it will hurt. The warrior managed a pained smile. Cannot hurt worse than it does now. You would be surprised. Lyra looked around the crowd, found who she was looking for. You, the tall one. I need your help. A young warrior stepped forward, uncertain but willing. What is your name? Thomas, ma'am. Not ma'am, just Lyra. I need you to provide countertraction. Do exactly as I say. Can you do that? He nodded. Lyra positioned him. He would hold the warrior's torso steady while Lyra worked on the arm. Countertraction was essential. Without it, the reduction would fail. What is your name? Lyra asked the injured woman while she prepared. Sarah. The warrior's jaw was clenched. Sarah Blackridge. Blackridge. The same name as the battle. Lyra filed that away for later consideration. Sarah, I am going to use the Cunningham technique. It is gentler than some methods but requires patience. I will need you to stay very still and try to relax the shoulder muscles. I know that sounds impossible right now, but the more you can relax, the easier this will be. Sarah nodded, sweat beaded on her forehead. Lyra had performed this procedure more than 50 times over 6 years. On pack members who injured themselves training or hunting, on travelers passing through who needed help, on anyone who needed it, whether the council approved or not. Each time, she had learned, had refined her technique, had developed the kind of muscle memory that came from repetition and careful attention to feedback. 50 successful reductions, not a single failure, not a single case of lasting nerve damage or vascular compromise. She knew what she was doing. Lyra sat facing Sarah, took the injured arm gently, positioned it at 90 degrees of abduction, bent the elbow to 90 degrees. This was the starting position, the foundation on which everything else built. Thomas, maintain steady counter-traction, not pulling, just holding firm against her torso. Sarah, remember to breathe. Try to let the shoulder muscles go soft. Lyra began the technique, her hand on Sarah's wrist. Gentle external rotation of the humerus. Not forcing, just guiding, waiting for the muscles to release, for the joint to find its way home. She could feel it under her fingers, the resistance, the spasm, the body's instinct to guard against movement that might cause more pain. But Lyra was patient. She maintained steady, gentle pressure, waiting for that moment when the muscles would fatigue, would release, would allow the reduction to happen. Breathe, Sarah. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Let your body relax. I know it hurts. I know you want to fight it, but fighting makes it worse. Trust me. Let go. Sarah's breathing slowed, deepened. The warriors around them had gone quiet, watching. Lyra was aware of them only at the periphery. Her focus was entirely on the joint, on the subtle feedback under her fingers, on the tiny shifts that told her when to apply pressure and when to wait. She had learned this patience from her grandmother. Field medicine was not about force. It was about reading the body, understanding its language, working with it instead of against it. Every healer could read textbooks, could memorize techniques, but the truly skilled learned to listen, to feel, to know when a joint was ready to reduce and when it needed more time. Lyra felt the shift, the subtle give that meant the muscles were releasing. She adjusted her angle fractionally, applied gentle pressure at precisely the right vector, guided the humeral head back toward the glenoid fossa, patient, steady, confident. There. Pop! The joint slid back into place with a distinct sound that everyone heard. Sarah gasped, her whole body jerked. Then she sobbed with relief as the acute, tearing pain vanished, replaced by a dull ache that was manageable, bearable, human. Lyra did not stop. The reduction was only the first step. Now came the assessment. She moved Sarah's arm gently through range of motion, internal rotation, external rotation, abduction, adduction, looking for restrictions, for grinding, for anything that might indicate additional damage. "Can you feel your fingers?" "Yes." Sarah's voice was stronger now, steadier. "Wiggle them for me." Sarah's fingers moved. All of them. Good motor control, no nerve damage. Lyra palpated the radial pulse at Sarah's wrist. Strong, steady, no vascular compromise. Good. Lyra met Sarah's eyes. The shoulder is back in place, no apparent nerve or blood vessel damage. But you will need to rest it. Immobilize it for at least 2 weeks. Then gentle range of motion exercises. No combat training for 6 weeks minimum. She looked at Thomas. "I need cloth for a sling. Something strong enough to support the arm but soft enough not to irritate." Thomas was already moving, producing a length of clean linen from somewhere. Lyra fashioned it into a proper sling, not the makeshift kind that would slip and fail, but a proper medical sling with support under the elbow and around the neck, the kind that would actually immobilize the joint and allow healing. As she worked, she explained aftercare, the warning signs to watch for: increased pain, numbness, color changes in the hand. Any of those meant blood flow or nerve compromise and required immediate attention. She explained the exercises, how to gradually restore range of motion without risking another dislocation, the timeline for return to training, what to expect during healing. It was thorough, professional, the kind of patient education her grandmother had insisted on. Healing is not just fixing the immediate problem. It is ensuring the patient understands how to participate in their own recovery. Knowledge prevents complications. When she finally stood, her knees ached from kneeling on hard ground, but her hands were steady. Her voice was calm. She felt the familiar satisfaction, the bone-deep certainty that she had done her job well. The crowd had grown while she worked, pack members watching with varying expressions, some impressed, some resentful, some calculating what this meant for pack politics. Magnus was there, his face unreadable. Beside him stood Garrett, jaw tight with something that might have been anger or might have been old grief resurfacing. "You have your grandmother's skill," Magnus said. The words were neutral, neither praise nor criticism, just statement of fact. "I had a good teacher." Lyra kept her voice level, respectful but not deferential. "Yes, you did." Magnus's gaze moved to Kael, who had appeared at some point during the procedure. Watchful, protective of his warrior. "And it seems you have made an impression on our guests as well." Kael's expression gave nothing away, but when his eyes met Lyra's, there was something there: recognition, assessment, the look of a commander evaluating an asset, seeing capability, seeing value, seeing someone who could perform under pressure without panicking. "Where did you learn that?" Sarah's voice carried genuine curiosity. Pain still roughened it, but respect colored the edges. "My grandmother. She ran field hospitals for 40 years, territorial wars mostly. She believed healers should be able to work anywhere, battlefield, forest, wherever we were needed. You are trained." Kael's words were not a question. Really trained, not just assist level, full combat medicine. "Yes." "Your pack knows your skill level?" "They know." Lyra kept her voice neutral. "They just do not think an Omega should be performing advanced medical procedures. That is the role of ranked healers. I am supposed to assist, not lead." Kael's jaw tightened. Something flashed in his eyes. The look of a military mind offended by wasted talent, by incompetence elevated over skill, by hierarchy that put politics above effectiveness. Sarah climbed to her feet with Kael's help, tested her weight, moved her good arm experimentally. Her shoulder was properly immobilized now, protected, given the chance to heal. "Thank you," Sarah said. She met Lyra's eyes directly. "I have dislocated that shoulder 3 times in the past 2 years. Every time, the reduction took longer, hurt more. You did it in less than 5 minutes, with less pain than I have experienced from more senior healers." Lyra felt heat rise in her cheeks. Compliments were rare, acknowledgement of competence rarer still. "I'm glad I could help." Sarah glanced at Kael. Meaningful communication passed between them in that brief look. Then she turned back to Lyra. "If you ever need employment, we could use someone with your skills. Our last medic." She paused. "We lost her 6 months ago. We have been without proper medical support since." The words hung heavy. Lost her, not retired, not reassigned. Lost, meaning dead, meaning this unit had known grief, had carried loss, was operating with a hole in their ranks that they had not been able to fill. Lyra did not know what to say. "Thank you. I will remember that." The crowd began to disperse. Training resumed. Life returned to its normal rhythms. But Lyra stood in the center of the square, feeling the weight of choices forming around her. Invisible hands shaping a future she had not yet chosen, but could already feel pulling at her. Kael lingered. Sarah had moved away to sit in the shade, testing her shoulder's range of motion, despite Lyra's instructions to rest. The commander's storm-gray eyes studied Lyra with an intensity that made her want to look away. She forced herself to hold his gaze. "That was well done," he said quietly. "Quick assessment, appropriate technique, good patient management. You kept her calm while you worked. That matters as much as technical skill." Lyra did not know how to respond to praise from someone who actually understood what they were praising. Who knew enough about field medicine to recognize competence when he saw it? "My grandmother taught me that fear and pain made patients tense, that tense muscles made procedures harder, that good medical care includes helping people feel safe enough to relax." "Smart woman." Kael's expression softened fractionally. "I wish I had known her. I wish you had too. She would have liked you. She respected tactical thinking. She said healing was its own kind of combat. That understanding strategy made you better at the immediate work. She was right." Kael glanced toward where Sarah sat. "My unit operates outside traditional pack structure. We take contracts, provide tactical support, security, specialized skills that normal packs cannot offer. We need a medic, someone who can handle trauma, who can work under pressure, who can keep warriors alive in situations where help is not coming." He looked back at Lyra. "I know we just met. I know this seems sudden, but I saw what you did yesterday with Ember. What you did just now with Sarah. You are wasted here. Your pack does not value you properly." "We would." The offer landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. Lyra's heart hammered. "I cannot just leave. This is my pack, my home, everything I know." "Is it?" Kael's voice was gentle but relentless. "Or is it a cage that happens to be familiar?" Lyra had no answer to that. "Think about it," Kael said. "We are here for 3 days. That gives you time to consider, to decide if what you have here is worth keeping, or if you want something different, something better." He turned to go, then paused, looked back. "For what it is worth, Ember asked about you this morning, 3 separate times. Wanted to know if the Moonlight Lady would come visit. She does not attach to people easily. Trauma does that, makes trust difficult. But she trusts you. I trust her judgment on these things." He walked away, left Lyra standing alone in the square with an offer she had not expected, with possibilities spreading before her like roads she had never known existed, with the terrifying realization that maybe, just maybe, her grandmother had been right. Maybe she was meant for more than surviving in the margins. That night, Lyra sat in her grandmother's rocking chair and tried to process the day. She had reduced a shoulder in front of half the pack, had demonstrated competence that could not be denied, had received an offer to join a tactical unit operating outside traditional hierarchy. And tomorrow, the council would almost certainly summon her, would demand explanations, would remind her that Omegas assist healers. They do not perform procedures. They do not make offers to strangers. They certainly do not consider leaving pack protection for uncertain futures with unknown wolves. Tomorrow would bring consequences, choices, changes she could not yet see. But tonight, lying awake in the darkness once again, unable to quiet her racing thoughts, Lyra allowed herself to imagine, to wonder, to entertain the dangerous possibility that somewhere in the world she might be valued for what she offered instead of punished for what she lacked. She lay awake wrestling with hope that refused to die, with possibility that burned like fever in her chest, with the understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk toward uncertainty instead of accepting the certainty of cages. She did not sleep, could not sleep. Her mind turned over the same questions again and again. What if there was another way? What if belonging did not have to mean accepting less than she deserved? The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Outside, the night was clear and cold. Stars wheeled overhead, and somewhere in the Eastern Lodge, a child dreamed of moonlight ladies, and a man made plans for a future that might include a healer who knew her worth. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own choices. But tonight, Lyra lay awake with possibility coursing through her veins like electricity, unable to sleep, unable to stop hoping, unable to imagine going back to the resignation that had defined the last 5 years. She lay awake, waiting for dawn, wondering what it would bring, knowing that whatever came next, she would face it as her grandmother had taught her. Competent, brave, ready to choose freedom over safety if that was what courage demanded. She lay awake with the dangerous realization that she already knew what she wanted, that the choice had been made the moment a child had called her, nice, and a commander had looked at her like she mattered, and a warrior had thanked her for skills the pack refused to acknowledge. She lay awake, and in the darkness, with nothing but her thoughts and her grandmother's memory for company, Lyra began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved the more her grandmother had promised. That maybe it was time to stop surviving in the margins and start living somewhere she could truly belong. Lyra woke to pale sunlight filtering through her window, though woke was too generous a word for the transition from restless half-consciousness to full awareness. She had spent the night drifting in and out of exhausted dozing, never quite achieving real sleep. Her mind had refused to quiet, kept circling back to the same thoughts again and again, storm-gray eyes, a child's small hands in her hair, the weight of an offer she had not expected, the dangerous whisper of possibility. At 21, she had learned that hope was expensive, that imagining better futures led only to sharper disappointment when reality reasserted itself. But lying awake in the darkness, she had discovered that some thoughts would not be silenced by caution or experience. Some possibilities demanded consideration despite every lesson learned about keeping expectations low. She rose and dressed carefully. Not her work clothes stained with yesterday's mud, not her ceremony dress ruined beyond repair, but the simple gray tunic and pants her grandmother had worn to official meetings, professional, practical, the clothes of someone who valued function over display, the clothes of someone preparing to defend herself before authority. The summons came with first light, exactly as she had known it would. A young pack runner appeared at her door, face carefully neutral, message brief, formal. The council requests your presence. 1 hour. Do not be late. Lyra braided her pale hair back tight while water heated for tea. No loose strands, nothing that could be read as careless or emotional. She was going before the council. She would present herself as what she was, a trained medic, someone whose skill spoke louder than bloodlines or scent. She made tea from chamomile and valerian root, herbs for calm, for steadying nerves before difficult conversations. Her hands were steady as she poured, but inside something coiled tight with anticipation, with the certainty that today would bring confrontation, ultimatums, choices that could not be unmade. The council chambers occupied the central hall of the main lodge, high ceilings that disappeared into shadow, stone walls that held cold even in summer, torches mounted in iron brackets cast flickering light that made everything feel unstable, impermanent. The room was designed to intimidate, to make those summoned feel small. Lyra had stood here before, after saving Marcus Redthorn, after other incidents where her competence had exceeded her authority. She knew the layout. The platform where the 5 council members sat elevated above supplicants. The empty space in the center where accused parties stood alone. Exposed. Judged. Magnus sat center as pack leader. To his right, Elder Thorn, 73 years old, shaking hands folded in his lap, face carefully neutral but eyes carrying something that might have been shame or might have been resentment. Hard to tell. To his left, Elder Wren, 70 years old, silver-haired, keeper of pack law and tradition, a woman who valued order above innovation, who believed the old ways existed for good reasons and should not be lightly discarded. Flanking them were the enforcers, Garrett Wolfsbane on one side, 30 years old, hard-eyed, jaw tight, radiating controlled anger that seemed to fill the room like smoke, and Isla Blackwater on the other, 28, calmer, but no less dangerous, a woman who had earned her position through competence and cold pragmatism. Lyra walked to the center of the room, stood where defendants always stood, did not bow, did not lower her eyes. She met their gazes with quiet dignity, with the certainty that she had done nothing wrong, that competence was not a crime, that saving lives should not require apology. Lyra Ashenheart. Magnus's voice carried the weight of formal proceedings. You are summoned to address questions regarding your conduct yesterday. I am here to answer. Magnus gestured to Elder Wren. The older woman leaned forward slightly. Her voice was dry, precise, like wind over stone. You performed an advanced medical procedure, in public, without authorization from the head healer, without proper supervision. Is this accurate? I reduced a dislocated shoulder. Yes. And you did this despite knowing that such procedures are reserved for ranked healers? I did this because the warrior was in pain, because every minute delayed increased risk of permanent nerve damage, because Elderthorn's hands shake too badly to perform the reduction safely. I did this because it was necessary. Necessary, Garrett's voice cut in, sharp, edged with something darker than simple anger, something that tasted of old grief gone toxic. You decided what was necessary. You, an Omega with no official rank, no authority, no right to make such decisions. I have the skill, the training. More than 50 successful procedures performed over 6 years. 0 failures, 0 lasting complications. That gives me the right. The silence that followed was absolute. Lyra could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of 5 sets of eyes on her, calculating, measuring, deciding how much defiance they would tolerate before making an example. Isla spoke next. Her voice was colder than Garrett's, more controlled, more dangerous in its calm. You have been warned before about overstepping, after the Marcus Redthorn incident, after others. Yet you continue to act as if pack law does not apply to you. Pack law says healers should help the injured. That is what I did. Pack law says Omegas assist ranked healers. They do not perform independent procedures. Elder Wren's voice carried absolute certainty, the kind that came from decades of enforcing tradition. You know this. You were reprimanded for this. Yet you persist. Because the alternative is watching people suffer when I have the ability to help them. Lyra's voice stayed level, but something fiercer crept into it, steel beneath calm. I will not apologize for using skills my grandmother spent decades teaching me. Skills that save lives. Skills that this pack needs whether you want to acknowledge it or not. Magnus raised a hand. The others fell silent immediately. He studied Lyra with an expression that gave nothing away. Commander face, the look of someone who had made hard decisions and lived with consequences, who understood the weight of authority and the burden of wielding it. The issue is not your skill, Lyra. No one disputes that. The issue is order, structure, the hierarchy that keeps packs functional. When individuals decide their expertise places them above established authority, chaos follows. And when established authority prioritizes hierarchy over competence, people die. Lyra met his gaze directly, refusing to look away. Sarah Blackridge would have lost use of her arm if I had waited for proper authorization. Marcus Redthorn would be dead if I had refused to perform surgery without supervision. How many more have to suffer before competence matters more than proper procedure? Garrett stood abruptly, his chair scraped against stone with a sound like a blade being drawn. You overstep. Again and again. Do you think your skill makes you special? Makes you exempt from rules that govern everyone else? I think my skill makes me useful. And I think this pack is in no position to waste useful resources on pride. Magnus's hand came down on the armrest. The sound echoed like thunder. Let me tell you about positions, Lyra Ashenheart. Let me explain what you seem determined not to understand. He stood, moved to the edge of the platform. His presence filled the room. This was Alpha Command, the weight of leadership that bent others to its will, that demanded submission or exile, nothing in between. We are at war. Not declared, not official, but war nonetheless. Territorial disputes with 3 neighboring packs, rogue activity increasing monthly, trade routes disrupted, supply lines uncertain. We have lost 14 warriors in the last year, 14 good wolves who bled for this pack. And do you know how many medics we have to treat the wounded who keep coming? He paused, waiting for an answer Lyra would not give. 3. We have 3 ranked healers. Elder Thorn, who can barely hold instruments steady. Elder Wren's daughter, who is skilled but 8 months pregnant and cannot risk field work. And Medic Jonas, who is 70 years old and whose eyesight is failing so badly he misdiagnosed a compound fracture as a sprain last month. The words landed heavy. Lyra had known the pack was strained, had heard whispers about border conflicts, but she had not known the full extent, had not understood how close to breaking they were, how desperate the situation had become. "We need medical personnel," Magnus continued, his voice carrying the weight of authority barely held in check. "Desperately. Every pack in this region does. The territorial wars killed or crippled most of the experienced combat medics. The younger generation is still training, still learning. We are operating on a deficit that grows worse every season. Every year, we lose more warriors than we can replace. More medics retire or die than we can train." He looked at Lyra with something that might have been regret, or might have been calculation. Hard to tell which. "You have skills we need, training that takes decades to acquire, experience that cannot be taught, only earned. If you were properly ranked, properly positioned within our structure, you would be invaluable. We could assign you to where you are most needed, could utilize your expertise to save lives, could build our medical capacity around your competence. But you refuse. You insist on operating independently, on making your own calls without consulting proper authority, on treating hierarchy as if it were optional rather than essential, and that makes you dangerous. Because if every skilled individual decided they were above pack structure, we would have chaos, we would have collapse, we would have anarchy." The logic was sound. Lyra could hear it, could understand the reasoning, but she could also see the trap, the way they framed her competence as threat rather than asset, the way they insisted she must submit to their authority before they would value her skill, the way they wanted her compliant, useful on their terms, never on hers. "So you want me integrated," Lyra said quietly. "Part of your structure, subject to your authority. We want you to be part of something larger than yourself." Isla's voice was calm, clinical, dispassionate in the way of someone discussing resource allocation rather than human lives. To recognize that individual skill serves the collective, that personal expertise must be channeled through proper hierarchy. That is what pack means. That is what civilization requires, unless the collective refuses to recognize the individual. Lyra met her gaze. "You want me to submit to authority that has spent 5 years telling me I am insufficient, that has reprimanded me for saving lives, that has given me ultimatums instead of opportunities. You call this integration. I call it subjugation." "Enough!" Magnus's voice cracked like a whip. But Garrett was not finished. He moved down from the platform, crossed the floor toward Lyra with deliberate steps. His presence was meant to intimidate, to make her step back, acknowledge his superior rank, submit. Lyra held her ground. "You want to know the real issue?" Garrett's voice dropped, became almost conversational, which made it more dangerous, more intimate in its threat. "My brother was a medic, Eric Wolfsbane, 19 years old, trained, competent, eager to prove himself." Garrett's jaw clenched, the muscles jumping with suppressed emotion. Eric volunteered for Border Patrol, wanted to earn rank through field service. He was assigned to a routine patrol, standard configuration, 12 warriors, 1 medic. What could go wrong with those numbers? Everything, as it turned out. They were ambushed by rogues, coordinated attack, professional execution. 3 warriors went down in the first minute. Eric tried to treat them all simultaneously, tried to stop the bleeding while fighting continued around him, tried to save everyone because that is what healers do. They try to save everyone. He took a blade to the leg, femoral artery, the kind of wound that kills in minutes if you do not know exactly what to do. The warriors with him were combat trained, not medical. They knew how to fight, how to kill, but not how to apply a tourniquet, not how to pack a wound, not how to stop an arterial bleed. Garrett's voice had gone flat, empty. the kind of tone that came from grief that had burned through rage and left only ash. They watched him die in 4 minutes, watched him bleed out while they stood helpless, while they fumbled with bandages they did not know how to use, while my baby brother died calling for help that never came. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. Lyra's throat was tight. She understood his grief, understood the guilt, the survivor's burden of trying to prevent future tragedies by controlling everything, by making sure no one else made the choices that led to loss. "Your brother did not die because medics operated independently," Lyra said quietly, her voice gentle but firm. "He died because this pack sent one medic to support 12 warriors in hostile territory, because you did not have enough trained medical personnel, because the gap between what you needed and what you had was too large, because leadership made tactical errors that put him in impossible situations. And forcing me into compliance does not fix that gap. It just ensures you have one more medic who follows orders instead of saving lives. The council has approved a match for you." Garrett said it like pronouncing sentence. "Final, irrevocable. Thomas Wolfsbane, my younger cousin, 20 years old, training as a medic under Elder Thorn. You would form a proper healer pairing, sanctioned, recognized. Your skills would be valued within appropriate structure." The words landed like stones. A match, arranged, decided without her input, without her consent. Thomas Wolfsbane. She knew him, had met him during training sessions, eager but clumsy, with none of the disciplined medical work required. He lacked the temperament for emergency medicine, the ability to stay calm under pressure. He would get people killed through incompetence dressed as enthusiasm. "I decline. It was not a request." Garrett's smile was cold, sharp-edged. "It is council decision, for the good of the pack. Omegas do not decline approved matches." "I do." "Then you refuse pack directive." Garrett glanced back at Magnus. The pack leader's expression was carefully neutral, but he did not contradict Garrett, did not step in. This was Garrett's play, and Magnus was allowing it, maybe even encouraging it. "What are the consequences?" Lyra asked, though she already knew. Had known from the moment she walked into this chamber that they had prepared options, cages of different sizes, all designed to break her will. "You will be assigned to Border Patrol support," Garrett said, "effective immediately. Field medical coverage for warriors on disputed territory. 6-month rotation. You wanted to use your skills? You will. Under proper military authority, following orders, learning what it means to operate within chain of command." It was a death sentence dressed as duty assignment. Border patrols were dangerous, unpredictable, operating in hostile territory with minimal backup. Medics sent to support them had life expectancy measured in months, not years, especially Omegas who could not fight, who made easy targets for rogues looking to cripple pack medical capabilities, who died alone in the forest while their assigned warriors fought too far away to help. "And if I refuse both options?" "Exile." Garrett's voice was flat. "Immediate. You would have until dawn tomorrow to leave pack territory, with nothing but what you can carry, no provisions, no escort, no safe passage agreements with neighboring packs." Lyra looked at Magnus, waiting for him to intervene. To acknowledge this was extortion, coercion dressed as concern for pack welfare. But the pack leader's face remained neutral, carefully blank. This was Garrett's play with Magnus's tacit approval, the council speaking with one voice, presenting united front. "There is a third option." Elder Wren spoke into the silence, her voice carrying the weight of tradition, of proper order. "Accept the match. Accept proper rank within medical hierarchy. Use your skills in ways that do not undermine established structure. You would be valued, Lyra, protected, given authority appropriate to sanctioned partnerships. Your children would be valued, your place secure. As long as I obey, as long as I stay in my assigned place, as long as I accept that my competence matters less than hierarchy. As long as you remember you are part of a pack," Elder Wren corrected, "not an individual operating by your own rules, not a lone wolf pretending civilization does not apply." 24 hours, Magnus's voice carried finality. "You have until tomorrow dawn to decide. Field assignment, match acceptance, or exile. Choose wisely. Dismissed." The council session ended without ceremony. Lyra walked out into morning sunlight that felt too bright, too normal, the world continuing as if nothing had changed when everything had changed. She had 24 hours to choose which cage to accept, which version of subjugation to embrace, which way to lose herself, unless she chose the fourth option, the one they had not mentioned because they did not believe she would dare. The option that meant walking away from everything familiar into complete unknown. The option that meant trusting strangers over pack. That meant choosing freedom over safety. The option that meant leaving. She needed to warn Kale. The thought came immediate, urgent. If Garrett was moving against her this aggressively, he would not stop there. The strangers represented exactly the kind of independence that threatened his worldview. Warriors operating outside traditional hierarchy, choosing contracts over pack loyalty, living proof that there were other ways, better ways, ways that valued competence over compliance. Garrett would see them as threats, as dangerous influences, as resources to be controlled or eliminated. He would move against them, try to force them into service, use them as examples of what happened to those who rejected pack structure. Lyra walked quickly toward the Eastern Lodge, not running, not drawing attention, just an Omega going about her business. Nothing suspicious, nothing that would alert watchers. Sarah answered her knock, took one look at Lyra's face and stepped aside without question. Inside, Kale stood at the table studying maps. Ash was cleaning weapons with methodical efficiency. Ember sat in the corner, plaiting grass into intricate patterns. All of them looked up when Lyra entered. "What happened?" Kael's voice was calm, but his eyes tracked her movements, reading body language, tension, threat assessment happening in real time. "The council summoned me. About yesterday. About performing the shoulder reduction without authorization. And?" His gaze never wavered. "And they gave me an ultimatum. Accept an arranged match to Thomas Wolfsbane, who has no aptitude for medicine and would get patients killed. Or take field assignment to border patrols, which is essentially slow execution. Or face immediate exile." Kael's expression hardened. Ultimatums usually have hidden clauses. What are they really asking? Compliance? Submission? Proof that I know my place and will not challenge their authority again? Lyra's hands clenched. "But that is not why I came. They mentioned you yesterday. Information about rogue movements. Intelligence you could provide. Garrett sees everything through military utility. You are a former commander with tactical knowledge. Sarah is a weapons expert. Ash is intelligence specialist. If he thinks he can force you to stay, to work for this pack, he will try." Ash looked up from his weapon, sharp gaze assessing threats. "You think they will try to detain us?" "I think Garrett sees you as resources, and he is desperate enough to use any means necessary to acquire resources the pack needs. We leave tonight." Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, practical, "before they can move against us." "Running looks guilty," Kale countered. "Makes us appear to be hiding something worth extracting. Makes them more likely to pursue. Staying makes us vulnerable." Sarah crossed her arms. "And I do not like being vulnerable." Before they could continue the debate, footsteps approached outside. Quick, urgent, someone running. The door burst open and a young wolf stumbled in. Not pack messenger, not official escort. Someone else. Someone Lyra recognized with a start. One of her brother's friends from before Daniel had moved north, before the distance between them had grown too wide to cross. The young wolf was breathing hard, face flushed from running. He thrust a sealed message toward Kale. Said someone paid him good coin to deliver it quietly, that it was urgent, time-sensitive, that he was told to put it directly in the commander's hands. Kale broke the seal, read quickly. His expression shifted. Surprise, then something darker. Calculation. He handed the paper to Ash, then to Sarah, then to Lyra. The message was from her brother, Daniel Ashenheart, 24 years old now, written in the careful hand Lyra remembered from childhood, from before their parents had disowned him, from before everything had changed between them. "Lyra, if you are reading this, you have met Commander Ironwood and his unit. I need you to understand something critical. Your council is not content with simple exile or forced compliance. They are planning something worse, something that will trap all of you. Garrett and Magnus met in the council chambers less than an hour after your session ended. They think their plans are secret. They are wrong. I have maintained an intelligence network within the pack for 2 years, not for espionage, for protection, for knowing when the people I left behind might need help, for being able to act when necessary. My primary contact is Marcus Redthorn. Yes, the hunter whose life you saved 3 months ago. He has not forgotten what you did, has not forgotten that you gave him back to his children when the pack's official healers had written him off. He serves on night watch now. Light duty while he finishes recovering from the surgery only you could perform. Marcus overheard the council's real plan. They know Commander Ironwood cares about the child. They know Ember has attached to you with the fierce certainty children have when they recognize kindred spirits. They will use that attachment as weapon, will threaten to separate you from Ember unless Ironwood agrees to work for them, will threaten you with field assignment that amounts to execution if he refuses, will hold all of you hostage to each other until compliance is the only option that keeps everyone alive. This is not speculation. This is documented strategy. Garrett laid it out explicitly. First, deny you all options that do not end in submission. Then create situation where your fates are entangled. Make you responsible for each other's safety. Use your compassion against you. Force good people to make terrible choices to protect those they care about. I know this because I lived through similar when I refused my arranged match 3 years ago. When I chose Sarah over pack loyalty. When I decided love mattered more than tradition. They tried the same tactics, threatened Sarah's family, threatened my position, threatened everything I cared about until leaving was the only choice that did not destroy everyone I loved. I left, built new life in Northern Territory, found pack that valued choice over compliance, found place where competence determined rank instead of bloodline. Found freedom I had not known existed, and I maintained contacts here because I knew eventually you would need the same choice, the same escape route, the same chance at life beyond these cages. Sarah contacted me 6 months ago, not randomly, deliberately. She had heard stories about the Ashenheart healers, about our grandmother's legendary skills, about her granddaughter who had inherited not just her techniques, but her courage, her defiance, her refusal to let hierarchy override competence. Sarah asked if I knew combat medics looking for unit placement, wolves dissatisfied with traditional pack structure, wolves who wanted something different. I told her about you immediately, about your skills that exceeded grandmother's in some ways, about your situation here, about how this pack was wasting your potential, crushing your spirit, making you small when you were meant to be extraordinary. She suggested routing through our territory, said their unit needed to travel south anyway, that perhaps meeting you would be mutually beneficial, that you might want options, that they certainly needed healer with your exact combination of skills and courage and willingness to operate outside traditional boundaries. I did not arrange this meeting to trick you. I arranged it to give you real choice, not the false choices our pack presents, not compliance or punishment, not subjugation or exile, but actual freedom. The chance to be valued for what you can do instead of limited by what you lack. The chance to find pack that chooses you back, that wants you, that needs exactly who you are instead of trying to reshape you into something acceptable. Commander Ironwood is honorable. I have worked with wolves who served under him during the territorial wars, wolves who would follow him into hell because they trusted his judgment, his tactical thinking, his absolute refusal to sacrifice his people for political considerations. He was discharged for choosing his unit over mission completion, for valuing lives over orders, for being exactly the kind of leader who keeps good wolves alive instead of using them as expendable resources. His unit operates outside traditional pack structure by choice. They take contracts, provide specialized services, live by code that values competence and loyalty over hierarchy and compliance. They need medic, not assistant, not subordinate who follows orders without thinking, but equal partner who makes medical calls without interference, who has authority commensurate with expertise, who is valued for skill instead of limited by designation. You would fit perfectly. You already fit. Ember sees it, Sarah sees it, Kael sees it. Now you need to see it. Need to believe you deserve better than what this pack offers. Need to choose freedom over familiar cages. Leave tonight. Do not wait for dawn. Do not give them chance to implement their plan. Take what you can carry. Trust these people I have sent to you. And know that I will do everything in my power from the north to smooth your path, to provide safe contacts, to ensure you have support network as you build new life. You are meant for more than surviving in margins, little sister. Grandmother knew it. I know it. And I think you know it too. You just need courage to choose it. To walk away from everything familiar into unknown that offers actual chance at belonging. at being valued, at living instead of merely surviving. Be brave, choose freedom, choose yourself, and know that wherever you go, you carry grandmother's legacy, her skills, her wisdom, her absolute refusal to let others define her worth. That legacy is not bound to this pack. It is bound to you, and you can take it anywhere, can use it to build something better, something true to who you actually are. Your brother who loves you and believes in you and has never stopped hoping you would find the courage to leave. Lyra Ashenheart. P.S. The courier who brought this is Marcus Redthorn's eldest son, 16 years old, training as scout. He owes his father's life to you. He can be trusted absolutely. Tell him anything you need. He will get word to me through routes Garrett cannot intercept, and I will do what I can to help from distance. P.P.S. Sarah sends her regards. Says any sister of mine is sister of hers. Says you are welcome in our home if you ever make it north. Says she would like to meet the healer who saved her mate's father figure. We have built good life here. You can too. Wherever you choose to go, with whomever you choose to trust. The message trembled in Lyra's hands. Her brother, who had not spoken to her in 3 years after their parents had disowned him for refusing an arranged match, who had left for the Northern Territories and built a new life, who had maintained contacts in the pack she thought had forgotten him, who still cared enough to risk exposure by sending this warning. "How does your brother know our medical needs?" Kael's voice was gentle but curious. "How does he know to contact us specifically?" Sarah cleared her throat. "I may have reached out to Daniel 6 months ago, after we lost Mira. Your grandmother trained him before he went north, yes? Before he made it and left?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Before he chose love over pack loyalty. Before our parents declared him dead to them. I contacted him," Sarah continued. "Asked if he knew any combat medics looking for unit placement. Wolves who might be dissatisfied with traditional pack structure, who might want something different. He told me about you immediately, about your skills, about your situation, about how the pack was wasting your potential." Sarah's expression was carefully neutral. "I suggested we route through this territory on our way south, that perhaps meeting you would be mutually beneficial, that you might want options, that we certainly needed your skills. You planned this." Lyra's voice was flat, shocked. "The arrival, the timing, all of it. We planned to meet you," Kael said quietly, "to offer you a choice if you wanted it. We did not plan for Ember to attach so quickly, did not anticipate the Council would move this aggressively. But yes, we came here specifically because Daniel said you were the best combat medic he had ever seen. Better than your grandmother in some ways, more adaptable, more willing to innovate, and we needed someone with those exact qualities." Lyra sat down hard, her legs suddenly unsteady. This was not chance, not random kindness from strangers. They had sought her out, had planned to recruit her, had come here with specific purpose. "Are you angry?" Ember's small voice cut through the tension. "Clear, worried. That we wanted you to come with us? That we hoped you would choose us?" Lyra looked at the child, at her wide, worried eyes, at the fear that Lyra would reject her now, that knowing the truth would change everything. "No, sweetheart, I am not angry, just surprised." "Good surprised or bad surprised?" "Still deciding." Lyra managed to smile. "Ask me when my heart stops racing." "We leave at midnight," Kael said. "Decision made, announced with the authority of someone used to being obeyed, with or without you. But I hope it is with. Your brother is right. You deserve better than what this pack offers, and we can give you better. Not perfect, not safe, but better, more honest, more true to who you actually are." "What are you offering?" Lyra met his gaze. "Really offering? Not just vague promises of being valued. Specific terms. A place in my unit. Full medical authority. No one overrides your calls in the field. You would be third in command after Sarah and myself. Equal partner in decision-making. Equal share of contract payments. Your expertise given the respect it deserves." "And the child?" Lyra glanced at Ember. "Needs a mother," Kael said, his voice carrying something raw, vulnerable. "I can protect her, train her, give her stability, but I cannot give her what you already do. Safety that comes from gentleness. Understanding that comes from shared experience of being different, being other, being marked as not enough by people who should know better." Lyra looked at Ember, at Kael, at Sarah and Ash watching with carefully neutral expressions, at the message from her brother still clutched in her hand, at the reality that in 12 hours she would make a choice that would define everything that came after. "I need time to think." "You have until midnight," Kyle said gently. "The decision is yours. No pressure, no obligation. But know that we want you with us. For your skills, yes, but also for who you are. For the competence and courage it took to save Marcus Redthorn when it would have been easier to let him die. For the kindness that wrapped a shivering child's feet in your only shawl. For the defiance that reduced Sarah's shoulder despite knowing the council would punish you for it. We want you because you are exactly the kind of person who makes units like ours work, who values mission over politics, who chooses to do what is right over what is safe." Lyra walked back to her cabin through afternoon light that felt surreal, disconnected from reality. The world looked the same, sounded the same, but everything had changed. In 12 hours, she would make a choice that would define the rest of her life, leave everything familiar, trust strangers, step into complete unknown, or stay, accept one of the cages, survive by making herself small enough to fit into spaces designed for people who were not her. The walk was short, but felt like crossing continents. Every landmark carried memory. The tree where she had fallen and broken her arm at age 8, where her grandmother had set the bone with gentle hands and gentler words. The path where she used to walk with her mother before the first choosing, before the humiliation, before her mother had stopped looking at her with hope and started looking at her with resignation. The corner where Marcus Redthorn's children had found her 3 months after she saved their father, where they had given her purple asters picked from their garden, where the eldest had whispered "Thank you for giving us back our papa," where Lyra had understood for the first time that her skills mattered, that she could change outcomes, that competence had value even if the pack refused to acknowledge it. Now those same children's older brother had brought her message from Daniel, had risked pack anger to deliver warning that might save her life. Because Marcus Redthorn remembered, because gratitude ran deeper than pack politics, because some debts could not be repaid but could be honored. Her cabin looked smaller than she remembered, more isolated, surrounded by forest that pressed close like walls, or like bars. Cage without lock, prison without guards, just the weight of expectations and the fear of what lay beyond known boundaries. Inside, she stood in the center of the single room and tried to see it objectively. This was her entire world, 21 years of life contained in one small space. Grandmother's rocking chair, medical supplies organized with obsessive precision, journals stacked on makeshift shelves, dried herbs hanging from ceiling beams, the bed where she had slept since her grandmother died, the table where she had studied anatomy texts by candlelight, the hearth where she had prepared medicines, the life she had built from scraps and determination and skills no one wanted her to have. She could stay, keep this, keep the familiar routine, keep the illusion of safety that came from knowing exactly what each day would bring. Wake, work, wait to be called for emergencies, exist in margins, survive but never thrive, accept one of the council's ultimatums and preserve at least this much, this small space, this minimal existence. Or she could leave, walk away from everything she knew, trust people she had met 2 days ago, step into future with no guarantees, risk everything for possibility of something better, gamble her survival on strangers' promises and her own competence and the dangerous whisper of hope that refused to die. The choice should have been impossible. Every rational consideration argued for staying. Safety, familiarity, the devil you knew versus the devil you did not. But rationality had never fully controlled her decisions. If it had, she would not have saved Marcus Redthorn, would not have reduced Sarah's shoulder, would not have wrapped Ember's feet in her only shawl, would not have spent her entire life defying expectations and refusing to be small despite every pressure to diminish herself. She began to pack. The decision came not as lightning bolt revelation, but as quiet certainty settling in her bones. Her grandmother would leave, would choose freedom over familiar cages, would walk toward unknown rather than accept known limitations, would trust her own competence more than pack promises of protection that came wrapped in conditions and control. Lyra pulled her traveling pack from under the bed. Military surplus, canvas and leather, built to last, to carry what mattered. She had bought it 5 years ago from trader passing through. had hidden it, had told herself it was just practical to have emergency supplies ready, had never admitted she was preparing for exactly this moment. For the day, courage would override caution, for the choice she had always known would come eventually. First, the surgical kit. Carbon steel instruments wrapped in oiled cloth, each piece positioned exactly right, protected, ready for use. These tools had saved Marcus Redthorn, had reduced 50 dislocated shoulders, had sutured countless wounds, had proven her competence again and again despite Pack refusal to acknowledge it. They were more than instruments. They were evidence, proof, legacy. She packed them with reverent care, each piece in its proper place, the way her grandmother had taught her, the way field medics had carried surgical kits through 4 decades of war. These instruments would save lives wherever she took them, in unknown places, under unknown circumstances, with unknown patients. The work continued regardless of location. Competence transcended territory. Second, the journals. 6 leather-bound volumes filled with her grandmother's cramped handwriting. Every case study, every technique, every lesson learned through 40 years of battlefield medicine. And 2 more volumes in Lyra's own hand. 5 years of her own cases, her own observations, her own refinements of grandmother's techniques, collective wisdom spanning 2 generations, knowledge too valuable to leave behind, too important to risk losing. She packed them wrapped in spare clothing for protection. Each journal represented years of experience, decades of accumulated skill, the kind of knowledge that could not be replaced if lost, that took lifetimes to gather, that was meant to be passed forward, grandmother to granddaughter, teacher to student, one generation of healers to the next. Third, the herbs, carefully dried, properly stored, organized by usage and potency. Willow bark for fever, yarrow for bleeding, comfrey for bones, arnica for bruising, calendula for infection. Each jar labeled in grandmother's shaking hand from before the sickness took her words. Each preparation made to exact specifications, each dose measured, tested, proven effective. Lyra could gather more herbs wherever she went, could rebuild supply from local flora, but these specific preparations represented years of work, hours of careful harvesting at peak potency, precise drying conditions, proper storage in amber glass to preserve effectiveness. Starting from nothing would take seasons. Better to carry what she had, what she knew worked, what had proven itself. Fourth, clothing, practical, durable, nothing fancy, work clothes that could handle blood and mud and long days in harsh conditions. Her grandmother's gray tunic and pants that still smelled faintly of sage and dried lavender. The clothes Lyra had worn to council sessions. The clothes that said competent professional instead of desperate omega. The clothes that let her present as healer rather than supplicate as subordinate. Fifth, personal items. Few, carefully chosen. The purple asters Marcus's children had given her, pressed and preserved. Reminder that her skills mattered, that she could change outcomes. The wooden carving her brother had made before he left. Small wolf running free under moon. His way of saying goodbye. His way of saying be brave. His way of saying some cages are meant to be escaped. Last, her grandmother's shawl. Not the one she had given Ember. That had been practical wool. Warm but replaceable. This was different. Spider silk blend. Impossibly delicate. Impossibly strong. Dyed deep indigo with patterns that showed healing herbs worked into the weave. Grandmother's masterwork, worn only on special occasions, kept wrapped in cedar to preserve it. Legacy piece. Too precious for daily use, but too important to leave behind. Lyra wrapped it carefully, tucked it deep in the pack where it would stay protected. She might never wear it, might never have occasion worthy of its beauty. But it was linked to grandmother, to legacy, to tradition that went deeper than pack politics, to lineage of healers who had chosen competence over compliance for generations, to women who had refused to be small despite every pressure to diminish themselves. The packing took 2 hours. The cabin emptied slowly. Each item carried weight beyond its physical mass, carried memory, carried meaning, carried the accumulated evidence of 21 years of existence. By the time she finished, her entire life fit in one pack and one medical bag. Everything that mattered, everything worth saving, everything she needed to start over. She looked around the empty cabin, at the spaces where things had been, at the hooks where herbs had hung, at the shelf where journals had rested, at the absence that now defined the space more than the remaining furniture. This had been home. For 5 years since grandmother died, for 16 years before that while grandmother lived, every memory she had existed within these walls. First smile, first word, first successful suture, first time reducing dislocated shoulder, first time saving life, first heartbreak, first hope, first everything. And now she was leaving it, walking away from the only home she had ever known, stepping into unknown with nothing but skills and courage and desperate faith that somewhere in the world she could find place where competence mattered more than designation, where being different was asset rather than liability, where she could be valued instead of tolerated. The sun was setting when she finished. Evening light painted everything gold, made it look almost beautiful, almost worth staying for, almost enough to override the bone-deep certainty that leaving was only option that did not end with her soul slowly crushed under weight of compliance. She sat in grandmother's rocking chair one last time, let the familiar motion soothe her racing heart, tried to imagine grandmother's reaction to her choice, tried to hear the old woman's voice through memory and longing. The answer came clear as spoken words. Her grandmother would approve, would celebrate, would push her out the door with both hands if she hesitated, would choose freedom for her granddaughter even if it meant never seeing her again, would value Lyra's happiness over proximity, would want her to live instead of merely survive. Lyra stood, shouldered her pack, picked up her medical bag, took one last look around the empty cabin, at the life she was leaving, at the cage she was escaping, at everything familiar she was walking away from in hope of finding something better. She did not cry, did not let herself feel the weight of loss quite yet. That would come later, in quiet moments, in the middle of unknown nights when homesickness hit like physical pain, when she questioned her choice, when fear whispered that she had made terrible mistake, when the cost of freedom felt too high. But tonight, walking toward the forest edge where Kael's unit waited, Lyra felt only determination, only certainty, only the bone-deep knowledge that this was right choice, hard choice, terrifying choice, but right. She walked through packlands one final time, past houses where children slept, past training grounds where warriors drilled, past council hall where her fate had been decided without her input, past everything that had shaped her, confined her, limited her, defined her as insufficient. She walked away from all of it, head high, step steady, pack on her back, medical bag in hand, every skill her grandmother had taught her ready to deploy, every lesson learned ready to apply, every bit of courage ready to be tested. She walked toward unknown, toward freedom, toward possibility, toward pack that had chosen her before they knew her, that wanted her skills, that valued her competence, that saw her difference as asset rather than flaw. She walked toward future she could not yet imagine, but desperately hoped would be better than past she was leaving behind. The knock came at midnight exactly. Not Kael, not Sarah, Ember. The child stood in darkness wearing a pack nearly as big as she was. Her eyes were red from crying, but her expression was determined. "Please come," Ember said, her voice small but fierce. "Please do not stay here where they are mean to you. Please be my mama. I need you. Papa Kael needs you even if he is too proud to say it. We are pack. Better pack than this. Pack that chooses each other. Please." The raw honesty broke through Lyra's last hesitations. She knelt, gathered Ember close, felt small arms wrap around her neck with desperate strength. "I am coming," she whispered. "I already decided. I am coming with you." "Really?" Ember pulled back, searching Lyra's face. "Promise?" "Promise." Ember's smile was like sunrise. They met the others at the forest edge. Kael, Sarah, Ash, all packed, all ready, all waiting. "We should move quickly," Kael said quietly, "before anyone notices." They traveled through darkness in disciplined silence. Ash leading with Scout's instinct for safe paths, Sarah guarding rear with warrior's vigilance, Kael and Lyra with Ember between them, moving fast but careful, every sense alert for pursuit that might already be coming. They were 20 meters from pack boundary when torchlight flared ahead. Garrett stepped into their path, 8 enforcers with him, armed, ready. This was not request for explanation. This was detention. Lyra's heart sank, but Kael moved forward calmly, placed himself between the enforcers and his people, Alpha protecting his unit. "Let us pass," his voice carried command authority, the kind that expected obedience. "I cannot do that." Garrett's expression was hard, satisfied, triumphant. "You are security risks. The Omega has refused Pact directive. She will face consequences, and you will provide information about rogue movements, by cooperation or by force. Your choice. Information you have no right to demand." Kael's voice stayed level. "We are leaving, peacefully. You have no grounds to detain us." "You are in my Pact's territory. I have all the grounds I need." Garrett gestured. The enforcers spread out, surrounding them, cutting off escape routes. "If you will not surrender peacefully, you will be taken by force." "Last chance." Kael's voice dropped. "Dangerous, promising violence if pushed. Stand aside, or learn why the 5th Tactical Unit was legendary." Garrett's answer was to attack. The fight was brutal, professional. Kael moved with the kind of precision that came from decades of combat. He caught Garrett's first strike, used the enforcer's momentum against him, swept his legs, had him on the ground before Garrett realized what was happening. Sarah engaged 2 enforcers simultaneously. Her blade work was poetry: deflection, counter, strike, each movement flowing into the next. She disarmed the first with a move too fast to follow, blade spinning away into darkness. The second got inside her guard. Mistake. She drove an elbow into his throat. Not crushing, just stunning. He went down gasping. Ash fought like Ghost, using shadows, using terrain. One enforcer charged him. Ash sidestepped, grabbed the back of his head, used momentum to guide him face first into tree. Solid impact. The enforcer slid down, conscious but dazed. Ash moved to the next threat before the first had finished falling. Lyra pulled Ember to safety, watched as Kael's unit proved why they were feared. This was not random violence. This was controlled application of force, precise, measured, designed to end the confrontation with minimum lasting harm. Kael had Garrett in armbar now, classic submission hold. The enforcer's arm extended, elbow joint hyperextended over Kael's hip. One hand controlling the wrist, other controlling the elbow. Pressure applied in direction the joint was not meant to bend. "Yield," Kael said. "Flat, final, professional, or I break it. Your choice." Garrett's face was white, sweat beading despite cool night air. His free hand slapped the ground. Tap out. Universal signal. Submission. Kael released him immediately, stood, stepped back to safe distance, gave Garrett space to recover. No gloating, no unnecessary humiliation. Just clean efficiency of someone who had done this before. Who knew that making enemies was expensive? That leaving opponents some dignity meant they were less likely to seek revenge later. The other enforcers were down or yielding, not dead, not seriously injured, just defeated, outclassed by superior training and experience. "We are leaving," Kael said. "You will not follow. Tell Magnus that Lyra Ashenheart chose freedom, that skilled professionals can transfer between packs under territorial law. She is exercising that right. Contest it if you want. Territorial Council will side with her, because she has documented skill and this pack has given her nothing but restrictions. She is Omega." Garrett climbed to his feet, cradling his arm. "Omegas do not have that right. Combat medics do." Kael's voice carried absolute certainty. "And she is combat medic before she is Omega. If Magnus wants to contest this, he can file formal complaint through Territorial Council. But we both know how that will go. They will rule in her favor. Because competence transcends designation. Because talent should not be caged by politics. They cross the tree line into neutral territory. Into freedom. Into unknown." Lyra looked back once, saw torchlight in the distance, saw the only home she had ever known disappearing into darkness, felt the weight of everything she was leaving. Family, history, the familiar rhythms of pack life, everything safe, everything known. "Regrets?" Kael's voice came soft beside her. Lyra thought of ultimatums, of cages dressed as choices, of competence valued only when convenient, of a future that offered nothing but compliance or exile, nothing but cages of different sizes, nothing but subjugation in different forms. She thought of Ember's small hand in hers, of Sarah treating her like equal, of Kael offering partnership instead of hierarchy, of the possibility that somewhere in the world she might be valued for what she could do instead of punished for what she lacked. No. Her voice was steady, certain, no regrets. Good. Kale smiled, slight but real, because I think you are going to fit in just fine with us. They walked into darkness together, 5 souls bound by choice instead of obligation, by respect instead of hierarchy, by the understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from safety that was never really safe at all. Behind them, the pack would prepare explanations, justifications, ways to frame Lyra's departure as betrayal instead of liberation, ways to avoid acknowledging that they had driven away someone valuable through their own rigidity, their own insistence on hierarchy over competence. Ahead lay only uncertainty, unknown roads, dangers they could not yet see, challenges they would face together instead of alone, but also possibility, the chance to build something different, something better, something chosen. Lyra adjusted her pack, took Ember's hand, matched pace with warriors who had accepted her as one of them, who valued her for what she brought instead of limiting her for what she lacked. And for the first time in 5 years, she felt something other than resignation. She felt hope. The first week on the road taught Lyra what she had never learned in Packlands: how to move through hostile territory with tactical precision, how to survive with nothing but skill and the people beside you, how to operate as part of unit instead of isolated individual. They traveled fast with military efficiency. Ash scouted ahead, Sarah guarded rear, Kale held center, managing pace, and Lyra stayed in protected middle with Ember, learning, understanding what it meant to be valued member of functional team. Ember walked beside her, small hand in Lyra's, trusting in ways that still made Lyra's chest tight. The child was healing, slowly, talking more, still careful with words but opening like flower finding sun. The third night they made camp in hollow between hills. Ash set perimeter alarms. Sarah took first watch. Kale showed Lyra how to build fires that produced minimal smoke, how to cook over coals, small skills that meant difference between staying hidden and broadcasting presence. "You are adapting well," Sarah's voice came from darkness. "Most Omegas take weeks. You did it in days." "I had good teachers." Lyra stirred stew. "Your grandmother trained you in more than medicine. She taught you tactical thinking. She said healing was strategic work. That understanding context made you better at immediate intervention. Tell me about your last medic." Lyra kept her voice casual. "What happened?" Silence stretched. Then Kale spoke from where he sat sharpening blade. "Her name was Mira." His voice was quiet. "Different Mira than your grandmother. 32 when she died. Had been with us 4 years. Skilled, competent, good under pressure. She was also my mate." The words settled heavy in the air. Lyra had suspected from the way he looked at her sometimes, the way he watched her work with something that was not quite fear, not quite hope, something complicated that spoke of old wounds still healing, still tender, still capable of reopening if pressed wrong way. "What happened?" Lyra asked gently. "Ambush. 6 months ago. We were on extraction mission. Kidnapped Omega from rogue territory. Young, 17, taken during raid on border settlement. Her pack hired us to get her back. They had tried twice themselves, failed both times, lost warriors, needed professionals." His jaw tightened. The information was good, intelligence solid. "We knew where rogues were holding her, knew their numbers, knew their patrol patterns. We went in clean. Professional operation. Got the girl, started extraction. Should have been routine. We had done it 100 times before." Sarah took up the story, her voice carrying same controlled grief, same weight of memory. They were waiting. Not for us specifically, just waiting. Rogues who had learned to stake out extraction routes, who knew rescue teams always took fastest path back to safety, always prioritized speed over caution once they had their target. Smart tactics, professional ambush. We walked into kill box. Kale's voice had gone flat, empty. The tone that came from reliving trauma, from forcing yourself through memories that never stopped hurting. 30 rogues, maybe more. They hit us from 3 sides simultaneously. Coordinated, disciplined, not random violence. Tactical assault designed to overwhelm and destroy. Kale took point. Sarah continued, drew their attention, made himself biggest threat. Ash and I fought flanks, kept them from encircling, created corridor for extraction. Mira stayed with the target, 17-year-old Omega, who was terrified, traumatized, barely holding together. Mira kept her calm, kept her moving, did her job. She paused, swallowed hard. A rogue broke through my position, got past me while I was engaged with 2 others, went straight for Mira. Not random. Targeted. They knew killing medic crippled unit, knew it was smart tactics. Mira tried to defend. She had combat training, basic, enough to protect herself in normal circumstances. But she was medic first, fighter second, and she was protecting the girl. Could not fully commit to defense without exposing her patient. He put blade through her abdomen. Kael's voice cracked slightly. Just below ribs, angled upward. I saw it happen. Was 30 meters away, fighting through to her. Watched the blade go in. Watched her eyes go wide. Watched her understand immediately what it meant. Lyra knew those injuries intimately. Had studied them. Had treated similar wounds when possible. Liver laceration, possible splenic injury, massive internal bleeding. Without immediate surgical intervention, without proper equipment and controlled environment. Survival time measured in minutes. 10, maybe 15 if you were lucky and tough and willing to suffer. Not enough to retreat to safety. Not nearly enough to get real help. Mira knew what the wound meant. Kael continued. His hands had stopped moving. Blade forgotten. She knew she was dying. Made me promise to finish extraction. To save the girl we came for. To not let her death be meaningless. To complete the mission she had given her life protecting. What did you do? Lyra asked. Though she already knew. Already understood the impossible choice. The terrible calculus that came with command. I left Sarah with her. Took Ash. Fought through to safety. Got the Omega out. Delivered her to her pack alive and relatively unharmed. Completed the mission. Came back for Mira. She died while I was gone. Bled out in Sarah's arms. Told Sarah to tell me thank you. That she understood. That she did not regret any of it. That she loved me and was proud of what we built together. His voice broke completely on the last words. Tears tracked down his face in firelight. Silent. Unstoppable. The grief of 6 months finally finding release in presence of someone who might understand. Who might not judge the choice he had made. And the worst part. The part that haunts me. Kael's voice was barely whisper. She was pregnant. 8 months. We had been so careful. Took precautions. But these things happen. She wanted to keep the baby. I wanted whatever she wanted. We started planning. Started imagining future that included more than just contracts and missions. Started thinking about settling somewhere. Building home, raising family. The words landed like physical blows. Lyra's chest constricted. Pregnant. 8 months. So close to delivering. So close to new life. And instead, death for both mother and child. She was cleared for field work. Kael continued. Pack healers examined her weekly. No complications. Baby healthy. Mira healthy. One more mission before maternity leave. One last job before we started new chapter. Just one more. That is what we told ourselves. Just one more, and then we would be done. He looked at Lyra, eyes raw with pain. I have been asking myself every day since if I made right choice. If mission was more important than being with her when she died. If saving 17-year-old girl justified losing my mate and our child. If there was some other option I missed. Some way I could have saved everyone. Some tactical solution my grief blocks me from seeing. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Processing. Understanding that this was not just about tactics or medicine. This was about Kael's ability to trust himself again, to believe he could protect people he cared about without them dying because of decisions he made, to move past trauma that had shattered his certainty about everything. You made the choice she asked you to make. Lyra's voice was gentle but firm. Medical truth without false comfort. Honored her sacrifice. Completed mission she died protecting. That is not failure. That is love. Painful, terrible, but love nonetheless. She leaned forward. Medical professional delivering verdict. Abdominal trauma like that during late pregnancy. Even if you had stayed. Even if you had performed surgery right there in the field. Even with perfect equipment and unlimited time and ideal conditions. Survival chances were nearly 0 for her. 0 for the baby. You could not have saved them. No one could. But you could honor her. Make her death mean something. Complete what she started. Save the girl she gave her life protecting. That is what you did. That is what good commanders do. They carry weight. They make hard calls. They live with cost. They do not get luxury of choosing between good and bad options. They choose between terrible and slightly less terrible, and then bear burden of that choice forever. How do you know? Kale asked. How can you be so certain? Because I have treated enough abdominal wounds to know lethal from survivable. Because my grandmother trained me on battlefield medicine and taught me brutal truth about what injuries can be overcome and which ones cannot. Because I will not lie to you about medical realities to make you feel better about choices that were already made. Lyra met his eyes, held his gaze. Your mate knew she was dying, made rational choice about how her death would matter, asked you to complete mission. You honored that. You did not fail her. You did not fail your child. You did not fail anyone. You made impossible choice in impossible circumstances and carried cost with honor. That is all anyone can ask. The silence after was heavy but different. Not crushing, not suffocating. Something closer to shared understanding. To grief acknowledged without needing to be fixed. To loss that would never stop hurting but might eventually hurt less. I am afraid. Kale's confession came sudden, raw. I am afraid I am making same mistake again, that I asked you to join us because we need medic, because Ember needs mother, because I am so tired of being alone that I am willing to risk someone else's life just to fill void Mira left. Not because it is right choice for you, not because it is safe, but because I am selfish and desperate and broken. And Lyra understood the fear, the guilt, the terrible certainty that caring about people meant endangering them. That attachment was liability. That love was weapon others could use against you. I cannot promise I will not die. Her voice was steady, honest. I am combat medic. I go where wounded are. That means danger. That means risk. That is the job I chose, the work I want to do. She shifted to face him fully. But I can promise that if I die, it will not be because you failed. It will be because I made choices, took risks, did my work. That is on me, not you. My grandmother spent 40 years in battlefield hospitals, could have stayed safe, could have avoided danger, chose not to, chose work over safety because work mattered more. I am making same choice, with full knowledge of risks, with complete understanding of potential cost. How can you be sure you are making right choice? Kale asked. How do you know this is what you want? Because I know difference between leaders who value their people and leaders who use them. You value, you care, you make hard calls because they are necessary, not because they are easy, not because they benefit you personally, because they are right calls for unit, for mission, for people you are responsible for protecting. Mira knew that, stayed with unit for 4 years even knowing risks, understanding dangers, accepting cost, because work mattered, because you mattered, because being part of something larger than herself was worth potential sacrifice. You sound like her. Kale's voice carried surprise. Wonder. That is exactly what she would say. Those exact arguments, that same certainty. Maybe that is what all combat medics eventually learn, that work requires risk, that healing under fire means accepting you might not survive, but doing it anyway. Because alternative is watching people die who might be saved. Because competence without courage is just theoretical knowledge. Because some things are worth dying for, even if you desperately hope to live. They sat in silence after that, comfortable, understanding passing between them without need for more words. Ember had fallen asleep against Lyra's side, curled small and trusting. Sarah's watch continued, and somewhere in darkness, Ash moved through perimeter check with silent efficiency. This was family, not bound by blood, not sanctioned by pack law, but real in ways that mattered more than formal recognition. They had chosen each other, were learning to trust each other, were building something new from wreckage of individual losses, something stronger because it was chosen instead of assigned, valued because it was earned instead of assumed. The contract came 2 weeks later. Small pack, border territory. They had rogue problem. Den in abandoned mine, hostile group that raided settlements, took supplies, killed anyone who resisted. Standard mercenary behavior except these rogues were organized, professional. Someone with military training was running operations. The pack had tried to clear Den twice. Failed both times. Lost warriors, lost confidence, lost hope that they could handle problem themselves. They needed professionals, needed people who understood tactical operations, who could plan assault that accounted for defensive advantages, who could execute without losing more good wolves. Payment was substantial, gold, plus safe passage through their lands, plus connections to other packs who might need similar services. The kind of job that could establish reputation, could prove unit was viable, worth hiring, could start building network Kael wanted to create. But it was also dangerous. Rogues in defensive positions, unknown exact numbers, uncertain intelligence about capabilities and leadership. The kind of operation where good planning reduced risk but could not eliminate it. Kael gathered them for briefing. Spread map on flat rock. Marked positions based on Ash's reconnaissance. Ash has been watching the mine for 3 days. Give us your assessment. Ash stood, pointed to marks on map. 12 hostiles confirmed through direct observation. Possibly more inside that I could not see. They rotate watches professionally. 3 on patrol, 9 inside at any given time. Not random group. These are organized. Someone with military background is running operations. Leadership? 1 Alpha. Recognized him from war. Former territorial forces. Dishonorably discharged 5 years ago for excessive violence against civilians. Named Victor Bloodworth. Age approximately 40. Competent fighter. Dangerous tactician. Smart enough to train his people properly instead of relying on superior strength. Defenses? Main entrance here. Natural choke point. Good field of fire for defenders. Anyone approaching is exposed for 20 meters. Secondary exit here on east side. Smaller opening. Easier to block, but also easier for them to defend if they know we are coming. No other ways in or out that I found. They chose position well. Kael studied map. Tactical mind working through scenarios. Evaluating options. Planning approach that maximized success while minimizing casualties. We go 2-team. Sarah and I take main entrance. Make noise. Draw their attention. Full frontal assault. Make them think that is only threat they face. Ash, you circle to secondary exit before we start. Block their escape route. Pick off anyone who tries to run. But your primary job is containment. Do not let them scatter into countryside where they can reform and continue raiding. We end this today, completely. And me? Lyra asked. You stay here, 200 meters back, in cover, with Ember. You are our casualty collection point. Anyone wounded comes to you. You stabilize. Prepare for transport if needed. But you do not enter combat zone unless specifically called. Understood? Lyra wanted to argue. Wanted to be closer where she could respond faster if someone went down critical. But she understood reasoning. She was not combat trained. Would be liability in close quarters fighting. Would give units something additional to protect instead of allowing them to focus on threats. Understood. They moved into position at dawn. Ash had marked safest approach, best cover. They traveled in silence, hand signals only. Professional discipline that came from years of operating in hostile territory where noise meant death. Lyra settled into position with Ember. Shallow depression between rocks, good cover, good view of mine entrance, close enough to respond quickly, far enough to be relatively safe from stray fighting. Ember was quiet, too quiet. Her small face pale, eyes too wide, tracking every movement with hypervigilance that spoke of old trauma resurfacing. Seeing danger everywhere because she had learned danger could come from anywhere. You are scared. Lyra kept her voice low, gentle. Ember nodded. Small jerky movement. Papa Kael could get hurt, like before. Like when Mama Mira died. He could. Lyra would not lie, would not offer false comfort that would feel like betrayal when reality proved different. He is very good at what he does. So is Sarah. So is Ash. They have done this many times. They know how to stay safe, how to fight smart instead of hard, how to win without dying. But yes, there is always risk. What if something bad happens? What if they get hurt? Then I fix it. That is my job. I am very good at fixing people. My grandmother taught me everything she knew, and she was the best there ever was. Better than any healer in any pack. Better than most doctors with fancy equipment and sterile rooms. She could save lives with nothing but knowledge and will and steady hands. She taught me to do same. Ember looked up at her. Will you fix me, if I get broken more, inside? Oh, sweetheart. Lyra gathered her close. You are not broken. You are healing. There is difference. Broken means cannot be fixed. Healing means getting better slowly. You are healing. Every day. I see it. More words, more smiles, more moments where you forget to be afraid. That is healing. That is progress. That is hope. Promise? Promise. The assault began with smoke. Kael and Sarah threw canisters into main entrance. Thick, choking clouds that filled mine drove rogues out into open, into killing ground Kael had chosen, into position where superior numbers meant less than superior tactics. They came out coughing, disoriented, met with precise violence. Sarah's blade work was poetry, deflection, counter, strike, each movement flowing into next, efficient, beautiful, deadly. Kael fought with controlled fury, each strike purposeful, each movement calculated, fighting to end confrontation quickly, to overwhelm before rogues could organize effective defense. But Victor was not disoriented. He came out ready, organized his people even through smoke, created fighting retreat, gave ground slowly while maintaining cohesion, the mark of real military training, of leader who understood tactics, who could think clearly under pressure. The fight was brutal, professional, both sides experienced, both sides dangerous, clash of competence and will where small advantages meant everything. Lyra watched through scope Ash had left her, medical assessment running constantly, tracking injuries, preparing for what would come. Kael took knife slash across ribs, deep, bleeding heavily but not immediately life-threatening. He ignored it, kept fighting. Sarah absorbed heavy hit to shoulder, the one Lyra had reduced 2 weeks ago. She staggered, recovered, pressed forward despite pain. Then the complication. The mine did not have 12 rogues. It had 15. The extra 3 had been deeper inside, beyond where Ash could observe. They heard fighting, came to support their alpha, emerged from main entrance behind Kyle and Sarah, turned 2 on many into surrounded position, turned tactical advantage into potential disaster. Ash could not get clear shot from secondary exit, could not flank without leaving position, could not support without breaking containment and risking rogues escaping to reform elsewhere. Kael and Sarah were in trouble. Lyra saw it developing, saw a tactical situation collapsing, saw Kael fighting wounded and surrounded, saw Sarah protecting him despite her own injury, saw them being overwhelmed by numbers. "Stay here," she said to Ember. "No matter what happens, stay hidden, stay safe. Do not come out until someone you know comes to get you." "But you said not to go. You said to stay here." "I know what I said." Lyra grabbed her medical pack. "The kit with emergency supplies. Sometimes rules change. Sometimes you do what needs to be done, even when it is dangerous. That is what combat medics do. We go where wounded are, even when that means going into danger." She ran toward sound of fighting. 200 meters felt like miles. Her lungs burned. Her pack bounced. But she ran toward danger because that was where her people were, where her skills were needed, where she could make difference between lives saved and lives lost. She came in from side, not to fight. She had no combat training, no weapons beyond her grandmother's scalpel and her knowledge and her desperate courage. But she had medical supplies, had caustic powder used for wound cleaning, highly irritating to mucous membranes, painful but not permanently damaging. Victor had Kael on ground, blade raised for killing strike. Lyra did not think, could not think. She grabbed powder from pack, threw it in Victor's face. The rogue alpha screamed, clawed at his eyes. The powder burned, blinded, bought precious seconds. Sarah used those seconds. Blade through Victor's thigh. Femoral region, but not the artery. Disabling strike delivered with surgical precision. He went down hard. The other rogues saw their leader fall, saw him blinded and crippled, lost cohesion, lost will to fight. Some fled toward secondary exit, ran into Ash's position, found themselves contained. Some surrendered, dropped weapons, raised hands, submitted. The fight was over. Lyra dropped beside Kael. Assessment first, always assessment. 3 lacerations, rib wound deep, possibly penetrating to muscle. Forearm wound superficial, defensive. Thigh wound medium depth, bleeding steadily but not spurting. The rib wound was priority. She packed it with clotting agent. Applied pressure dressing with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved without hesitation. This was what she had trained for, what her grandmother had prepared her for. Field medicine under pressure, combat trauma with minimal resources. Kale's eyes found hers, gray, clouded with pain. "You were supposed to stay back." "I was. Then you needed me more than I needed to follow orders." His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. "Thank you for not letting me die stupid." "You are not dying at all. I am too good at this." She worked quickly. Thigh wound next, pressure, clotting, dressing, forearm last, least critical but still needing attention. When she finished, Kale was stable, weak from blood loss but not in immediate danger. Sarah limped over, shoulder clearly dislocated again, same one, second time in 2 weeks, her face tight with pain but voice controlled, professional despite agony. "Need me to reduce that?" "Please." Lyra performed reduction with practiced ease, Cunningham technique, second time on same joint. They would definitely need to discuss long-term solutions. Strengthening exercises, possible surgical intervention if it kept happening. Chronic instability was a serious problem that would only get worse without proper treatment. But that was conversation for later, for after they were safe, for when immediate crisis had passed. Ash appeared from secondary position, dragging 3 surrendered rogues, secured, disarmed, defeated. The rest had fled into forest. Would scatter, maybe reform elsewhere, maybe not. But they were no longer organized threat to this territory. Mission complete. "Good work with the powder." Ash's voice carried approval. "Respect. Improvised weapons are often most effective because no one expects them. You did well for non-combatant. I am medic, not warrior, but I protect my patients. Those can be same thing. Different tools, same goal. The pack paid well. Gold as promised, plus substantial bonus for clearing den so completely, plus recommendations to 6 other packs who had similar problems. The kind of word of mouth that built reputations. That turned one-time contracts into steady work. That proved unit was viable, professional, worth hiring. More importantly, they had proven themselves, had operated as unit under pressure, had succeeded despite complications, had adapted when plans failed, had trusted each other completely. That was worth more than gold, more than recommendations, more than reputation. That was foundation for everything else they wanted to build. That night, fever struck KL. Body's response to trauma, to blood loss, to stress of combat and injury. Not dangerous yet, but Lyra monitored closely, checking temperature every few hours, watching for signs of infection, administering willowbark tea for fever management. During delirium, inhibitions lowered, truth slipped past careful control. "Cannot lose you." His voice was slurred, thick. "Not another medic, not you, please not you." Lyra cooled his forehead with damp cloth, soothed him with gentle words. "I am fine. You are fine. Everyone is safe. We all survived. Mira was safe. Until she was not. Until she was gone. Cannot do that again. Cannot watch someone I care about die because I made wrong call, because I led them into danger, because I valued mission over safety." The confession settled heavy. Someone I care about, not just valuable medic, not just useful addition to unit, someone he cared about personally, the way that terrified him because caring meant risking loss, meant opening himself to pain of attachment when last attachment had ended in tragedy. Lyra understood. She was starting to care too, starting to feel things that went beyond gratitude for being valued, beyond relief at finding place where competence mattered, something deeper, more complicated, more dangerous because it meant vulnerability, meant risking rejection, meant hoping for future that might not materialize. But that was conversation for when KL was lucid, when they could speak honestly without fog of fever and pain medication clouding judgment, when they could acknowledge what was growing between them and decide what to do about it, whether to pursue it or suppress it, whether to risk attachment or maintain professional distance. For now, she focused on keeping him alive, on managing recovery, on doing her job with steady competence that had nothing to do with personal feelings and everything to do with professional obligation. The fever broke by morning. Kael woke clear-eyed, weak but recovering, embarrassed but not knowing exactly what he had said during delirium, only that he had said something he would normally keep private. "Thank you," his voice was rough, "for taking care of me, for coming when fight went wrong, for being exactly what this unit needed. You are welcome. Now rest. You heal faster when you follow medical orders." "Following orders from my medic." He managed small smile. "That is new experience. Get used to it. When it comes to medical calls, I outrank everyone. Those were your words. I am just enforcing them. They traveled for another week while Kyle healed, taking no contracts, moving slowly, giving bodies time to recover, giving Lyra time to ensure wounds were healing properly. No infection, no complications, no lasting damage beyond scars. Ash found the valley during scouting run. Unclaimed territory, too remote for most packs, too isolated, but perfect for people who valued independence over collective security, who wanted distance from traditional hierarchies, who needed space to build something new. The valley had everything they needed: stream, forest, open ground, natural defenses, and most importantly, unclaimed territory. "What do you think?" Kale asked Lyra. "Could we build something real here?" "We," she said deliberately, "all of us, yes." Building took 3 weeks. Kale's construction skills, Sarah's engineering, Ash's defensive positioning, Lyra's medical requirements, Ember helping everywhere. Main cabin for living, medical building for Lyra's practice, individual quarters for Sarah and Ash. They worked together. No hierarchy, just shared goals, equal contributions. On final day, Kale found Lyra in her medical facility organizing supplies. "Can we talk?" His voice was quiet. "Of course. I need to tell you about Mira, everything, before anything else happens between us." Lyra waited, patient, letting him find his way through this. "We met during joint operation. Her pack needed help. My unit provided it. She was combat medic. I was commander. We worked well together. After operation, I requested permission to court her. We mated 6 months later, had 3 years together, good years. Then she got pregnant. 8 months in, extraction request came, kidnapped Omega. Mira was cleared for field work. No complications. 1 more mission before maternity leave. The ambush was professional. 30 rogues, 3 sides. They knew we were coming. Mira tried to defend herself and the girl, but 8 months pregnant, slower, more vulnerable. The rogue who got her knew where to strike. Blade through abdomen, upward angle. His voice cracked. She knew what it meant, knew she was dying, knew baby was dying, made me promise to finish extraction, to save the girl, to not let their deaths be meaningless. I left Sarah with her, fought through, got the Omega to safety, came back. She died while I was gone, told Sarah to tell me thank you, that she understood, that she loved me. Tears tracked down his face. I ask myself every day if I made right choice, if mission was worth losing my mate and child, if there was another way I missed. You made the choice she asked you to make. Lyra's voice was gentle but firm. Honored her sacrifice. Medical reality. Abdominal trauma during late pregnancy. Blade upward through organs. Even with perfect surgery, survival was 0 for both. You could not have saved them. No one could. But you honored her. Completed mission she died protecting. That is love. Painful but love. What if I make same mistake with you? What if I lead you into danger that gets you killed? Then it will be my choice. I am combat medic. I know risks. I accept them. Because work matters. Because you matter. Because what we are building matters. I am falling for you, Kale whispered. Have been since you wrapped Ember's feet. I am terrified of losing you like I lost Mira. I am falling too. For someone who respects my competence, who values my expertise, who sees me as equal. She moved closer. I cannot promise I will not die. Neither can you. But I promise that if I die, it will be while doing work I chose, while being who I am meant to be. Kale cupped her face. I promise to stand beside you, to trust your competence, to never cage you for protection, to value your choices even when they terrify me. They kissed, careful, gentle, the kiss of 2 people who had lost too much but were choosing to be brave anyway. When they pulled apart, Ember was standing in doorway. Her expression was solemn, serious, measuring this moment against some internal standard only she understood. Are you my mama and papa now, for real? Both of them looked at her. This child who had brought them together, who needed them both in different ways, who was healing slowly under their combined care, who deserved answer that was true and complete and worthy of trust she was placing in them. If you want us to be, Lyra said, for real and forever, we choose you. Do you choose us? I want. Ember crossed to them with quick steps, fit herself between them, small arms wrapping around both. You are my pack, my real pack, better than one before. You see me, you want me, You do not look at me like I am broken thing needing fixed. You look at me like I am person who matters." Kale's arms came around them both, fierce, protective, but also gentle, careful not to squeeze too hard, not to overwhelm. This is family, chosen family, not bound by blood or pack law, but real in every way that matters. We are pack. We choose each other. We protect each other. We build life together that honors who we actually are instead of trying to force ourselves into shapes that do not fit. They stood together in doorway of medical building. 3 souls who had been broken separately, finding ways to heal together, building family from choice instead of obligation, from respect instead of hierarchy, from love earned through trust instead of love assumed through biology. The valley was theirs. The buildings were complete. The foundation was laid. Now came the work of building life on that foundation, of creating something that lasted, of proving that chosen family could be stronger than blood ties, that competence could replace hierarchy, that freedom could feel safer than cages ever had. 3 months later, message came from Magnus, carried by neutral courier with pack leader's seal, formal, official. Contract request, medical support for defensive operation. Magnus's pack was facing siege. 3 enemy packs coordinating assault on border garrison, heavy casualties, overwhelmed medical capacity. He needed combat medics. He was asking for Lyra specifically, offering substantial payment plus ongoing relationship with his pack for future work. Kale studied message, then studied Lyra's face. "How do you feel about going back?" "Complicated. Going back to place that rejected me, that tried to force me into cages, that gave me ultimatums instead of opportunities. But going as contractor, as professional they need, as equal instead of subordinate. There is satisfaction in that. Vindication. Proof that their loss was my gain. Could be trap. Could be. But Magnus has reputation for honor, and we could use gold, plus connections, plus proving we can handle major contracts successfully. Your call. I trust your judgment. We go. On our terms. My medical authority is absolute in field. I answer to no one on treatment decisions, and we get proper support, security, supplies, everything we need to do job right." They arrived at Magnus's pack lands 5 days later, not as returning members, as hired professionals with specialized expertise. The difference in reception was stark. Respect where there had been dismissal, welcome where there had been tolerance, value where there had been restriction. Magnus met them formally. Pack leader to unit commander, equals negotiating terms instead of superior dictating conditions to subordinate. "Thank you for coming. We need your help desperately. 14 wounded, 3 critical. Elder Thorn is doing his best, but trauma this severe exceeds his capabilities. We need someone with combat medicine training, someone who can handle battlefield injuries under pressure. Show me." Lyra's voice was professional, clinical. This was work. This was what she was good at. The garrison medical facility was organized chaos. Wounded warriors everywhere, overwhelmed healers trying to manage more than they could handle. Elder Thorn looked exhausted, defeated, like man who knew he was failing but did not know how to do better. Lyra walked through quickly. Professional assessment, triage, sorting wounded by severity, the skill her grandmother had taught her. The skill that meant difference between lives saved and lives lost when resources were limited and time was short. Red tags, immediate intervention or death. 3 warriors, sucking chest wound, abdominal evisceration, compound femur fracture with arterial bleed. These needed her attention first. These would die without immediate skilled treatment. Yellow tags, urgent but stable. 6 warriors, deep lacerations, dislocations, fractures without vascular compromise. These needed treatment soon, but could wait while she handled critical cases. These would not die in next hour. Green tags, walking wounded. 5 warriors, superficial cuts, bruises, minor injuries. These could wait. These could even treat themselves with basic first aid instruction. She organized chaos in under 20 minutes, directed traffic, assigned tasks to available healers, set up proper surgery space with good light and clean instruments, transformed disorder into functional medical operation through nothing but knowledge and authority and absolute confidence in her own competence. Then she went to work. Chest wound first. Young warrior named Dimitri, 23. Sucking chest wound from spear thrust, air entering pleural space with each breath, lung unable to inflate properly. Lyra created three-sided occlusive dressing, seal on three sides, open on fourth, allowed air to escape on exhalation, prevented air entry on inhalation, temporary measure. He would need proper surgery eventually. Chest tube, but this would keep him alive until she could get to him. This was battlefield medicine, immediate, practical, focused on keeping people alive long enough to get proper treatment later. Abdominal evisceration next. Older warrior named Gina, 38. Intestines visible through wound. High contamination risk, high infection risk, but alive, conscious. In shock but managing pain with remarkable stoicism. Lyra irrigated wound with saline solution, washing away dirt and debris. She examined intestines carefully, looking for perforation, for damage. Found minor tears, nothing immediately catastrophic, nothing she could not handle. She reduced organs carefully, back into abdominal cavity where they belonged, positioned correctly, then closed in layers. Fascia, to restore abdominal wall integrity. Muscle to provide strength. Skin to seal wound. Each layer closed with appropriate sutures. Each stitch placed exactly right, the way her grandmother had taught her. The way she had practiced on Marcus Redthorn 3 months ago when everyone else had said he was dead, when her competence had meant difference between funeral and recovery. The femur fracture last of critical cases. Young warrior named Sarah, 19. Compound fracture, bone visible through skin. Femoral artery compromised, bleeding into thigh, going into shock from blood loss. This was most complex, required surgical exposure, required finding artery, clamping above and below damage, repairing tear, stabilizing fracture, all while managing blood loss and shock and tissue damage from bones stabbing through vessels. Lyra worked for 6 hours straight. Kale assisted, following her orders without question, providing support she needed. Sarah managed yellow tags with practiced efficiency, reducing dislocations, splinting fractures. Ash handled logistics, getting supplies, managing space, keeping flow moving. They worked as unit, perfectly synchronized, each person contributing expertise, creating medical capability that exceeded what any of them could do individually. This was what they had built over months of working together. This was what made them valuable. This was why PAX hired them instead of relying on internal resources. Lyra saved 11 lives that day, lost 2. The chest wound developed complications she could not manage with available equipment. Pneumothorax progressed to tension pneumothorax despite her best efforts. The abdominal case went septic despite aggressive antibiotic treatment. 2 deaths out of 14 wounded. Better than expected given severity of injuries. Better than garrison healers would have managed alone. Better than most surgeons could have done under field conditions. But each loss still hurt. Each death was failure, even when rationally she knew some patients could not be saved. Some injuries were too severe, some infections too aggressive, some complications inevitable regardless of skill level. She stood outside medical facility afterward, exhausted, covered in other people's blood, hands still shaking slightly from adrenaline come-down, face streaked with sweat and tears she had not realized she was crying. Kale found her there, offered water, sat beside her in silence. "You saved 11. His voice was gentle. "Without you, maybe 2 or 3 would have survived. You gave them all fighting chance. That is all anyone can ask." "I know, but knowing does not make losses easier." "No, it does not. But you honor them by remembering, by learning from each case, by getting better so maybe next time you save 12 instead of 11, by continuing work despite cost, despite pain, despite knowing you cannot save everyone no matter how skilled you are." They sat together as sun set. As exhaustion settled in, behind them survivors rested, healing, alive because of skill and knowledge and desperate effort under impossible conditions. Magnus found them later. His expression was complicated, grateful, respectful, maybe slightly ashamed. "You did more in 6 hours than our healers could have done in days. Thank you, truly. You are welcome. That is what you hired me for. That is what I do, what I am good at, what I have trained my entire life to do." "Yes, about that." Magnus hesitated. Unusual for him. "When this siege is resolved, when things stabilize, I would like to make standing offer. Medical commander position, full authority over all healers, proper rank, proper respect, proper recognition. The role you should have had 5 years ago when you first demonstrated this level of competence. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Part of her wanted it. Wanted recognition. Wanted validation. Wanted proof she had been right all along. That her competence deserved authority. That they had been wrong to limit her. But larger part of her remembered why she left. Remembered cages. Remembered ultimatums. Remembered that they only valued her now because they needed her. That their respect was contingent on utility. That recognition would come wrapped in restrictions and obligations and expectations she could never fully meet. Thank you for offer. I appreciate it, truly. But I have built something better. Place where everyone is valued, where competence is recognized without needing crisis to prove it, where people choose to be there instead of being bound by obligation or limited by designation. I choose that. I choose life I built, people I found, freedom to practice medicine without restrictions or politics or hierarchy determining what I'm allowed to do. That is worth more than any title or rank you could offer. Magnus nodded slowly. I understand, and I respect your choice. But know that if you ever change your mind, if you ever want to return, you would be welcome. Not as Omega, as medical commander, as equal. Door is open. Garrett approached. His arm was in sling. Old injury from their fight 3 months ago had never healed quite right. Chronic problem from inadequate initial treatment. His expression was complicated. Shame, respect, regret. Thank you for coming, for saving my squad. I had 3 warriors in your critical list. You saved all 3. He paused, swallowed hard. I was wrong. About you. About everything. I thought control meant safety. Thought hierarchy prevented chaos. Thought forcing people into proper roles would prevent tragedies like my brother Eric's death. But you were right. Competence matters more than designation. Skill matters more than hierarchy. My brother did not die because medics operated independently. He died because capable healers like you were restricted from doing work they were trained for, because pack politics mattered more than effectiveness, because we valued compliance over competence and people died because of it. I am sorry for ultimatums, for trying to control you, for not recognizing your value until crisis forced me to see it, for letting my grief turn into tyranny that drove away exactly the kind of healer who could have saved lives if we had trusted her. Lyra studied him, saw genuine remorse, genuine growth, the kind that came from having assumptions destroyed and rebuilding from wreckage into something better, something wiser. Apology accepted. We all carry grief differently, make mistakes trying to prevent future losses. What matters is learning, growing, choosing better. Becoming people who value truth more than comfort, who choose what works over what feels familiar. Garrett nodded, extended his hand. She took it. Not friends. Perhaps never friends. But no longer enemies. Just 2 people who had been shaped by loss and were trying to do better. They left next morning. Contract fulfilled. Payment collected plus substantial bonus. Plus letters of recommendation to 6 other packs, plus standing invitation to return for future work. But more importantly, they left with confirmation, with proof that path they had chosen was right, that building something new was possible, that breaking from traditional hierarchy created space for something better, that competence could replace bloodline, that choice could be stronger than obligation. The valley had grown in their absence. 3 more families had arrived. Word spreading through networks of outcasts and wanderers, through people who did not fit traditional pack structures, who wanted something different, something better, something chosen. Settlement now held 19 people, still small, still fragile, but growing, becoming real, becoming sustainable, becoming proof that alternative was possible. Ember ran to meet them, her face bright with joy. She had missed them, but she had also been fine. Had been safe with community they were building, had been part of something that continued functioning even when founders were away. That mattered. That meant this was not cult of personality, not dependent on any individual. It was real community, sustainable, built on principles instead of hierarchy, built to last because it was built right. 6 months after leaving Magnus's pack, 6 months after choosing freedom over safety, 6 months after walking away from everything familiar into complete unknown, Lyra stood on ridge overlooking valley that had become home. Below, settlement had grown to 30 people. 2 more sanctuaries had been established in neighboring territories by people they had trained. Network was forming, slowly, carefully, but real. Proof that what they were doing mattered, that it could spread, that it could change how packs operated. KL found her there, slipped arm around her waist, comfortable, familiar. They had been together 6 months now, mated in simple ceremony 2 months ago, building life that was messy and complicated and beautiful, building partnership based on respect instead of hierarchy, on choice instead of obligation, on love earned through trust instead of love assumed through biology. Ember was down below, teaching younger children about medicinal herbs, passing on knowledge Lyra had passed to her, the cycle continuing, the legacy growing, not just grandmother to granddaughter anymore, but teacher to student, one generation of healers to next, knowledge spreading, multiplying, becoming something larger than any individual. No regrets? Kale asked, the question that had become ritual between them. Lyra thought about everything she had left behind. Pack, familiar, safety of known structures, thought about what she had found, partnership, purpose, freedom to be exactly who she was meant to be, family that chose her, work that valued her, life that felt authentic instead of constrained. No regrets. Her voice was certain. This is exactly what I chose, what I needed, what I fought for, what I almost did not have courage to reach for. But I am so glad I did, so glad I chose freedom over familiar, so glad I trusted you, trusted myself, trusted that somewhere in world there was place I could truly belong. Good, Kale's voice carried satisfaction, because I have something to tell you. She turned to face him, saw nervousness in his expression, unusual for him. What is it? 2 more packs have requested contracts, medical training, tactical consulting. They want to learn our methods, want to build their own versions of what we created here, want to understand how we operate, how we make it work, how we replace hierarchy with partnership without descending into chaos. That is good news, yes, but also means we need to expand, need more trained personnel, need structure to support growth without becoming hierarchy we fought against. Need way to teach principles instead of just techniques. Need to ensure what we built can spread without losing what makes it special. He paused. I want you to lead medical training program. Officially. Train next generation of combat medics. Pass on your grandmother's legacy. Make sure her knowledge does not die with us. Make sure other packs can develop healers who value competence over compliance, who choose work over politics, who understand healing is strategic work that requires freedom to operate without restriction. Lyra's throat tightened. This was what her grandmother had wanted, had dreamed of. Training program that valued competence over designation. That taught proper medicine to anyone willing to learn regardless of bloodline or scent or pack politics. That created healers who understood both art and science of saving lives, who combined knowledge with compassion, who chose to heal because work mattered, not because hierarchy demanded. Yes, her voice was thick with emotion. I will do it. For my grandmother. For Mira. For every healer who has been restricted because hierarchy mattered more than competence. For every Omega told their skills were insufficient. For every person who wanted to learn but was denied opportunity because of circumstances beyond their control. They stood together watching sunset, watching community below, watching future they were building from broken pieces of past, from losses that had taught them, from courage that had saved them, from choices that had freed them. Ember ran uphill, out of breath, excited. Mama Lyra, Papa KL, come quick, the new family is here, the ones you told me about. They need help. They followed her down, into valley, into work, into life they had chosen. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs. Built through choice, through courage, through understanding that sometimes freedom requires walking away from everything familiar. Sometimes it requires building something new from nothing. Sometimes it requires trusting that competence and care can replace hierarchy and control. Lyra had chosen, had walked away, had built something better, and in doing so had found not just purpose, but belonging. Not just competence recognized, but value celebrated. Not just survival, but life fully lived on her own terms. The quietest waters had run deep indeed, and in their depths she had found exactly what she needed: home, family, purpose, the chance to heal not just bodies, but broken structures that limited what people could become, the opportunity to prove that different ways were possible, that chosen family could be stronger than blood ties, that competence could replace hierarchy without chaos following. She had found her place in world, not given, earned, chosen, built through courage and skill and absolute refusal to accept limitations others tried to impose, and that made all the difference.